Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Before we dive into today's video, I want to know who's watching. If you're male, drop a white heart in the comments. If you're female, drop a blue heart. Let's see who rules the audience. Now for today's special What If Bella Found Caius Mysteriously Injured. This fanfic is packed with unexpected twists and hidden mysteries, so without any more delay let's get started. I cannot pull myself any farther. This cave will be my refuge until my body can repair itself or until something or someone else finds me. The pain is excruciating. It comes close to rivaling the burn of venom during the change from human to vampire. My only consolation at this moment is that I slaughtered every single one of those abominations. They were the last in our area, spreading their disease and madness. The deranged beasts unfortunately mangled me quite thoroughly before my task was complete. My regeneration would progress more quickly if I had a fresh supply of blood to flush their poison from my system. Given my current location, an isolated cave, and situation motion impaired, I will be residing here with only my thoughts for company for the foreseeable future. Fabulous. I think I will soon expire of boredom. I have catalogued every surface of this infernal cave, identified all the local wildlife I can hear outside of said cave. How long is my body going to take to heal? I wish I could lift my head or even twist my neck enough to assess the damage those beasts inflicted. I know it is severe. I've never taken this long to heal before, and I am becoming concerned. It is not normal for one of my kind to be rendered helpless, and if I were discovered by some in this situation, my existence would be ended swiftly and with a smile. A week. It has been 7 days, and I have not improved enough to even lift my still partially severed arms. I have reached the conclusion that I do not have enough blood in my system to sustain healing, let alone combat the werewolf poison left behind in the multitude of gaping wounds. How long will I rot in this dank cave? Surely I've not been missed yet. No one would consider an absence of a week odd for me while hunting those beasts. I have been known to take much longer. A new sound has reached my ears. Footsteps are approaching. Will this mystery visitor mean my salvation or my destruction? I groan internally. The visitor has a heartbeat. This is even worse. It could mean the exposure of our world. That this potential exposure could be my fault is highly ironic. But try as I might, I cannot make my limbs obey my urgent need to escape. Closer and closer the human comes until finally I can see the silhouette of a woman in the mouth of the cave. Hoping that perhaps she would take me for a mangled corpse and leave, I close my eyes. She comes closer still. If only I could move enough to get my teeth on her and gain access to her life-saving blood. I heard a soft intake of breath when she noticed me lying mauled and broken on the floor of the cave. Assuming that instinct would have her flee, I was startled when I heard her kneel above my head and felt her smooth back a lock of hair that had been stuck to my brow. After releasing a long sigh, she rose again and made her way back out of the cave. I was relieved and perturbed at the same time. If it was so easy for one human to find me, how soon would it be before I was discovered by another? The rest of the day passed and night fell as it had every day since the beginning of my entombment in this disgusting cave. In the early hours of the next morning a gunshot rang out, breaking the peace with its booming echo. Less than a half hour later I could again hear someone approaching. As I had yesterday, I closed my eyes, hoping to imitate one who had met an unfortunate end. I drew in the smallest breath I could manage without my chest moving enough for human eyes to register and discovered that my visitor was the same woman from yesterday. Why has she returned? She approached me directly, this time sitting to the beside me, and once more her hand glided across my forehead. Did she return to perform burial rites or some such nonsense? When warm liquid entered my mouth the charade was over. My, now coal black, eyes snapped open and I choked on the dirt-flavored liquid as I gasped in shock. Still the woman, young lady I corrected now that I'd gotten a closer look at her, remained where she was as if it were a common occurrence for her to find a severely mangled cold, hard, but still not dead creature that drank blood. Her calm brown eyes continued to look upon me, and a moment later she raised her eyebrows and lifted the clear container with a warm, red, but obviously not human blood, as if to ask if I would drink it. Had she really shot and bled an animal to feed me? Feeling my lip curl automatically at the thought of drinking something so vile, but not wanting to risk such an attempt at restoring myself, I opened my mouth in acceptance. She poured the blood slowly, stopping often to let me swallow until there was no more. Her attention then turned to my wounds. She looked with her face slightly scrunched as if displeased. How does this human know about vampires? She obviously expects the blood to start healing me. But more importantly, since she knows what I am and what I eat, why is she trying to help me? Is she insane? I normally do not lower myself to speak to the cattle that sustain me, but I had to know. Why are you doing this? I asked weakly. The damage to my throat was extensive and it left my voice without its usual commanding presence. Her only response was a sigh and a half-hearted shrug. If I had been at full health I would have held her by her throat and shaken her until she had provided me with the information I desired. Insolent human. I restrained myself from verbally lashing her however, knowing that however foolish, this girl was bringing me blood. After a few more minutes and one more inspection of my injuries, she left the cave once more. I lay there throughout another mind-numbing night, wondering how long animal blood would take to heal me, or if it were even possible. I knew of vampires that chose animals as their diet, but I had never heard of a vampire recovering from a werewolf attack without human blood. By the next morning I knew it was hopeless. The blood had not helped me in any way over all those hours. I was still in tremendous pain and highly immobile. She came again about mid-morning that day. As per her habit she lowered herself to the floor and softly rubbed my head. I was beginning to see it as her greeting and wondered why she had not once attempted to speak to me. She looked over my wounds and seemed disappointed by the lack of improvement, but still she said nothing. Wondering if I would get any information out of her today, I asked again, "Why are you doing this?" Still she said nothing. I had to bite back a snarl. How dare she defy me? Unwilling to give up just yet I tried a different inquiry. "How did you know what I am?" Someone was to blame for sharing our secrets and I fully intended to punish them. If I ever get out of this infernal cave that is. Not really expecting a reply I hadn't been watching the girl and the next thing I knew she had bared her right wrist and presented me with a scar that any of my kind would recognize. There were two silver-white crescent shapes embedded in her skin. A distinctive mark which could only have been left by a vampire. Pushing past my shock at seeing such a mark on this still very much alive young woman, I choked out, "How are you still human?" Her reply was a sigh and a small shake of her head. I couldn't stand any more of this foolishness. "Why won't you speak, you infernal woman?" I shouted as loud as my damaged throat would let me. Gone was the softness in those brown eyes that I had become accustomed to seeing, instead there was a hardness, an anger that did not seem suited to her, I grudgingly admitted, attractive features. She straightened her back, took a deep breath, and slowly lifted her hands to the rich brown curtain of hair that spilled forward over her shoulders. Her hair was so long and thick, in fact, that it covered almost the entirety of her upper body, and as her hands pulled the curtain of hair open and defiantly brushed it behind her shoulders, I understood why she had worn it so. Marring the skin of her pale throat were 4 deep pink marks that were obviously not new, but old deep scars. They began at the top of her neck just under the left side of her jaw and traveled down diagonally ending at her right collarbone. She really was lucky to be alive. 2 injuries that should have ended her life, but here she was caring for a vampire of all things. "I'm sorry." The words were foreign to me, but I did mean them. She must have seen the sincerity written all over my face because she seemed to lose her steam and with a long sigh, she settled back down into her normal slightly hunched position beside me. "Don't," I said quickly as she reached up to pull her hair forward once more, "don't hide them. They are a sign of power, of what you have endured and survived. You should be proud of the marks you bear." The look she graced me with was obviously questioning my sanity. "In my world," I continued, "you would be regarded as a warrior, for though you have attained scars you have still survived your battle." For my impassioned speech, I was rewarded with a small smile, a smile that transformed her face from one of good looks to a thing of pure beauty. It highlighted a tiny spark in her eyes that had not been present before in her gentle but stoic demeanor. She reached forward and gently squeezed my hand. She seemed to be saying thank you. After a somewhat awkward silence, since now I knew she couldn't respond verbally, she pointed to some of my injuries, and I related to her what I suspected to be the truth. They were inflicted by children of the moon werewolves, and it is unlikely I will heal enough to become mobile without human blood, though I appreciate your earlier effort. She ran a hand back and forth across her forehead, like someone trying to ease an oncoming headache. Then with her elbows supported on her knees she dropped her face into her hands. I didn't know what to say. Obviously I couldn't send her to my home for help. She would be drained before she knocked twice on the door. Sure, she could grab someone off the street and assist me in murdering one of her own kind, right? I can definitely see that one panning out. When she lifted her head again she looked determined. First she shook her head no, then she bared her teeth and chomped them twice. Before I could ask her what she was getting at, of course I wouldn't bite her, I couldn't even move, she had slipped a small knife out of her boot, stabbed her wrist just above the vampire bite, and pushed the now flowing blood to my lips. To say I was astounded would not even begin to describe what I felt in that moment. This lovely, caring, obviously insane warrior woman has just offered me her life's blood. As her warm, delectable, healing blood made its way through my battered body, I was nourished in a way I had not known in centuries. Not much time had passed when she swayed heavily to the side, pulling her wrist away with the action and barely supporting herself with the other arm. She looked incredibly white, and once she had balanced herself somewhat, instantly wrapped her shaking left hand around her punctured right wrist. She looked terrible, and I was beginning to think perhaps she had lost too much blood. I panicked at the thought. I wanted to know her story. "Are you alright?" I queried, she needed to be okay. This brave idiot woman has to be okay. She took a deep breath and started to nod to assure me she was fine when her eyes rolled into her head and she crashed to the floor. No. I cried. No, she can't die, not before I learn her secrets. Still not having full use of my arms, I used my fingers to pull my right hand in her direction. My arm was just long enough to reach her bleeding wrist and clamp my hand closed around it. She could not lose any more. As much as I needed it, for once I wanted a human body to keep the majority of its blood. I could already feel my power returning, thanks to her most generous gift, but will I be able to get her help in time? I looked at her once more, peaceful and beautiful with her hair and a wild halo surrounding her. She is an angel. My angel, and I will do all in my power to see that she does not fall. Minutes have never seemed so long. The gashes are still open, but I believe I will be able to carry her momentarily. Even at a slow run I should be able to get her to my home in just over an hour. I only hope we will be able to get her medical treatment in time. I will not be able to take her myself looking as I do currently, and there are few others I would trust with the task. Wincing, I pulled her tiny frame into my arms and made my way out of the cave. I was amazed at how potent her blood was. I should have needed twice the amount she gave to reach this level of healing. She would have great potential as an immortal, my mind whispered. Such powerful blood usually indicated a high likelihood of creating a gifted vampire, though there are exceptions to the rule. I should know, I am one such exception. With as much speed as I was able I ran with her body cradled securely to my damaged chest, the pain from the contact rendered inconsequential by my need to see her well again. We arrived at my home just as the sun was setting and she still hasn't regained consciousness. Her heart was beating more quickly than was normal for her and her skin had a clammy feel to it. With no thought to the scene I would cause I ran directly to the front gate which was thrown open at my arrival. "Master." The guard exclaimed, "You're injured." Not slowing, I flew down the familiar corridors, passing a few more gaping faces, until I reached the massive wooden doors that would lead me to my brothers. Bursting in and panting from my exertion in such a weakened state, I thoroughly shocked my brothers who were instantly at my side. Arrow gasped after touching my hand. "I will take her myself, brother," he said quickly. "Finish your healing and join us at the hospital when you are able." Knowing that he would get her the best medical help available, I gave in and crashed to my knees from the physical and emotional burden of the last few hours. "Come, let us get you fed," Marcus said as he took my arm to help me to my feet. "You will soon be well again." In the shower, after my feeding, I watched as the last of the gashes closed and faded. A vampire would still see the marks, but they would not be noticeable to humans. I could now rejoin my angel. I was anxious to see to her condition. The trip to the hospital took only a few minutes, and once inside I was able to track her to her room. "You look much better, brother. If I had not seen for myself what you have been through this past week, I don't know that I would have believed you." Arrow glanced at my angel. "She is a fascinating creature, is she not?" "Indeed she is," I replied. "She intrigues me." "In this you are not alone, brother. I have yet to tell you of a fascinating discovery I have made about your little friend here." "What is it?" I snapped, jealous that he knows something of her that I did not. "Peace, brother. It was not my intention to rile you. I think you will be astonished to hear that I cannot see into this young lady's mind." "Truly?" Arrow's smile almost split his face as he replied, "Not one little peak." He is right. I am astonished. Never before in our thousands of years have we come across anyone who capable of thwarting Arrow's gift, no vampire, and certainly not a human. "She will make a stunning immortal," he added offhandedly. "If she wants to be changed I will change her, but if she does not, she will not be forced. I will assume full responsibility for her." "She softened a heart of stone," he whispered, still watching her sleep. "Tell me what has been done for her," I demanded of my brother, uncomfortable with discussing the strange feelings I have begun to associate with a, still too pale, woman lying in a stark white hospital bed. "Well, to begin with, they have given her blood to replace what she lost when she fell and cut her wrist, and they are also giving her fluids. I was told she is most likely tired from the strain on her body and will awake on her own in a few hours. Thank you, brother, for seeing to her when I could not." I was ridiculously grateful that she would be well soon. I wonder if her voice could be restored. I have no way of knowing, the damage was obviously extensive. If you like, I will call Carlyle. He could perhaps give us a realistic medical assessment without personally having to deal with too many outside humans. I thought about his suggestion for a few moments. I would love to be able to do something for her after all she risked to aid me in my time of need. Venom would certainly heal her, but I wanted to present her with options. "Yes, call him," I decided. "Very well, I will see you both tomorrow." With that he rose and left me with my tiny warrior. 2 hours later she began to stir. Her eyes flew open wide when she realized he was in an unfamiliar setting. "All is well, il mio angelo," I reassured her from the chair I had pulled close to her bed. Her soft brown eyes found mine, and she slowly raised her hand to trace the path across my cheek where a terrible gash had been just that morning. You cared for me, and now I will care for you. Rest, little warrior, the doctor days you can leave in the morning. She gave me a sweet smile, nodded her head and drifted back off to sleep. Rays of early morning sunshine were streaming freely into the stark hospital room by the time her eyelids fluttered, marking her rise to consciousness. Overnight her skin had regained its normal shade of creamy paleness, a vast improvement from her pallor the day before. Did you sleep well? I asked as I watched her stretch like a contented cat after a long nap. Her face took on a faux pensive expression before she nodded in affirmation. Your discharge papers were delivered 30 minutes ago. Shall we remove ourselves from this horrific tribute to the color white? A full smile graced her face. I will wait for you just outside the door. With a small bow, I left her to dress. During her regenerative respite, my mind dwelled on a few rather glaring facts. Among them, that I have no idea who this woman is, where she lives, or if she is now considered missing. But more important is her knowledge of vampires. With perfect recall I would never forget the sight of the bite resting atop her still beating pulse. I must have answers. My hope is that she will consent to come with me today. My brother cannot wait to be introduced to such an oddity, the only silent mind he has ever encountered, and as for myself I want to solve as many mysteries surrounding her as possible. I turn to her and offer my arm as she exits her room. She really is a beautiful creature. Her hair is thick and shiny, with curls just enough to give her tresses a sense of life as they bounce with each footstep. The result is a constant fluctuation between hues of dark golden brown and a more sultry reddish mahogany. Her hide is nothing to remark on, but despite her small stature, she possesses an air which tells the world, without words, that she is resilient, enduring. Her form is neither voluptuous nor overly thin. She is elegantly built. Her type has been an inspiration to artists throughout the centuries. Even accustomed to vampire perfection, I can recognize the comeliness of her face with her expressive eyes of multifaceted liquid brown, surrounded by a slight ring of green that would barely be discernible to mortal eyes. They held a quiet intelligence. Her eyes had seen horrors that are not meant to exist outside of nightmares, yet she had come to the aid of a true living nightmare. Would she have offered herself so freely if she had known who she was restoring to health? I was wondering, Il mio Angelo, would you be interested in meeting my brothers today? One of them brought you in for treatment while I was still unable to be in public, but he would love the chance to see you awake. She raised her eyebrows, as if surprised by my suggestion. Me? Go with you? She mouthed, pointing first to her chest and then in my direction. I decided to take her shrug as acceptance. Yes, I assure you will come to no harm. Her only response was to wave my comment off as if it was no consequence to her. We made our way to the heavily tinted luxury vehicle left for us by one of the guard. The drive through the city was short, and as we pulled up to the gate of the castle, I noticed her eyes were wide, taking in all the details of the ancient building. Have my brothers meet us in my study. I ordered the guard at the door. He was gone before my companion could blink, and she jumped slightly at the rapid departure, but then only smiled and shook her head. She was obviously an admirer of art. Several times she paused during our journey, a slight pressure on my arm, the only communication needed to tell me that she would like to take a moment. We did have quite a collection adorning the halls, priceless paintings and sculptures alike. By the time we arrived at my personal study, my brothers were already waiting inside. I pushed open the thick wooden door and gestured for my angel to precede me. She stepped confidently into the richly furnished room, and with a wide smile, she dropped into a deep curtsy in front of Arrow and Marcus. My dear girl, Arrow could not help himself, he took her hand to help her rise, no doubt, trying to see her mind again. Now that she's conscious once more, we are so glad to see you in improved health. Come, please have a seat. He led her past my desk to one of 4 armchairs facing each other in front of a large stone fireplace. Once seated comfortably, she looked to me with questioning eyes, holding her left hand flat and mimicking writing with her right. Of course, one moment. Something about this human is impairing my mind. It is painfully obvious that writing would be a simple way to communicate. I was slightly embarrassed I hadn't thought of it before now. I handed her a small leather-bound notebook and a pen before seating myself as well. Upon receiving the writing implements, she immediately began to scratch away inside the book. My brothers and I all shared a questioning glance as we awaited our first true communication with our mystery guest. She turned her book around, and we were astounded to read, Your Majesty's Arrow, Caius, and Marcus, it is an honor to meet you. My name is Isabella Swan. Molto bella. Arrow exclaimed, clapping his hands in delight. A lovely name for a lovely lady, do you not agree, brother? He asked as he turned in Marcus's direction, thus missing the flash of sadness that crossed her face before it was wiped away. Would you perhaps consider being our guest here, for the time being, my dear? We would enjoy having the time to know more of you. Without hesitation, she quickly penned, "Yes, I thank you for the kind invitation, Your Majesty. Please, you must call me Arrow, I insist." "Now, it seems quite clear that you know who and what we are," he continued. "Would you be so kind as to tell me how you came to learn of us? We are, as I'm sure you can understand, a bit concerned about your knowledge." She bowed her head once more over her notebook. When she presented it again it read. "I haven't said a word." This sentence was accompanied by a face that would have been completely innocent had it not been for the mischievous twinkle in her eye. I am almost positive I saw Marcus's mouth twitch. The next entry in her book took some time. She seemed to struggle, looking for the right words. "I was involved with dated a vampire. I'm not sure how we lasted as long as we did. He said my blood called to him like none other before. Yet, he claimed he didn't want to hurt me. While showing me around his home, we came across a painting of you and he explained that you are the Volturi kings. You rule the vampire world and exist to maintain order and secrecy for vampires. You prevent unchecked hunting and chaos that could lead to exposure. He said the consequences of knowing the secret are being changed, or death. At the time I was elated, I thought it meant he wanted me forever. But I was very wrong. He tossed me away and left me to die. I wish he had drained me from the start." It pained me to see her face in that moment, obviously reliving deeply hurtful memories associated with her past lover. She had wanted to change. Just what had he done to make her prefer death to her continued existence? Her explanation brought forth more questions than it answered. Before any of us could bring ourselves to question her further, a loud gurgling erupted from her abdomen. "She hasn't eaten today," I mentally berated myself, and I seem to recall humans require meals much more frequently than we do. It will do her good to have a break, I suspect. "Jane." A moment later small blonde vampire appeared. "What may I do for you, masters?" she asked, eyeing the human with confusion. "Escort Miss Isabella Swan to see Jonna so she may get something to eat. Remain with her and show her to the open chambers in the south wing once she has finished." Jane's eyes widened minutely at my orders. "She knows the placement of our guest in my personal section of the castle, puts her under my protection. It will inform all the guard that Isabella is to be treated as an honored guest. Of course, Miss Swan, would you come with me please?" Isabella gifted me with a warm smile and dipped a small curtsy as she rose to leave us. "It is odd to care so much about the path of a single mortal life." Arrow mused once the door was closed. "This girl seems to draw us in, does she not? She has a gentle soul, in spite of all the severed bonds." The comment came from Marcus, who spoke barely above a whisper. "Those who she was closest to are dead. Some lesser connections remain, but they are bonds of friendship, not family or a great love. But the others?" He trailed off. "What of the others?" I demanded. Patience is not generally a virtue of mine. The others could very well have been the strongest of her life. I've only seen such concrete bonds among immortals. But they have been damaged, perhaps irreparably, and are now withered. If you will excuse me, brothers, I have something I would see to. What he could possibly be up to is beyond me. He takes interest rarely, but when he does, it is absolute. I too have errands, Arrow," I said, rising. "I have no idea where the girl lives and she has no possessions with her. She will need at least basic human necessities, whatever they may be. Do we expect Carlyle?" "Ah, yes. He is currently detained. He will not be able to be here before the weekend. But Isabella seems to be doing well enough. I'm sure a few more days will not affect the matter we have consulted him on, in any case." "You're correct. That injury is old and the treatment at the hospital has secured her general health. It would be fortunate if he is able to restore her voice, but I find I do not want to give her false hope. All will be well, Caius, you will see. Oh, spare me your incessant optimism," I quipped with no malice as I strode out the door. Arrow's cackling followed me down the corridor. 0000000000000. I can't believe I'm in the Volturi castle. When I first learned of them and their purpose, I knew that I should probably hope to never cross their path. Just shy of 2 years later, I was ridiculously glad they do the job that they do. The hell unleashed could have been so much worse, if not for them. Unfortunately, my losses were personal targets and below Volturi radar. But they unknowingly saved an entire pack of werewolves and many lives in the areas surrounding Forks. It's been nice having people talking to me again. I've been so lonely lately. When I first moved to Italy 3 years ago, I isolated myself on purpose. It wasn't hard to do once people realized I required sign language or paper to communicate well. I didn't care about anything. I was so lucky to have met the elderly couple who gave me a place to live and food in exchange for helping them with their needs, whether it be going to the market or doing laundry. I was about a month away from being homeless the day Emelina's market bag burst onto the street. I chased down her escaping fruit and got a new bag for her from the vendor. Afterward, she would not take no for an answer. She put her tiny foot down, pointed a crooked finger at me, and proceeded to tell me I was far too skinny and that I would come eat lunch with her and her husband, Eliseo. The rest just fell into place. I was invited back the following 2 days, and when they found out I was renting a room above a tavern, they offered me the spare bedroom of their small house in exchange for a helping hand here and there. They slowly but surely wormed their way into my heart. I know they wondered, but they never pushed to know my story. I cried for a week straight when they passed away 2 months ago, within 12 hours of each other. I cried for another week after an official-looking man came to the house looking for me. Melina and Eliseo left their house and small savings to me in their will. In a letter, they told me I was as close to family as they had, and they could think of no better way to thank me for the kindness I had shown them during their final years. I knew it was me, however, that will forever owe them a debt. At the time they took me in, they were all that kept me from giving up. So, for 2 months now, I have been doing odd jobs, mostly cleaning, to make a little money and keep my mind off of the terrible loneliness. I was startled out of my thoughts by Jane's crisp voice, telling who I'm assuming is Jonna to fetch me something to eat immediately. Guess she doesn't think much of Jonna. This way please, Miss Swan. She gestured to an adjoining room with a kitchenette area also containing a small, dark wooden table, and then proceeded to take up a standing position by the door. Thank you, Jane. I wrote to her. A stiff nod was her only reply. She was visibly shocked by my next communication. You were one of the guards sent to Washington State to destroy an army of newborns just over 3 years ago, weren't you? How could you possibly know that? She didn't sound angry, just surprised and curious. I invited her, with my hand, to take a seat beside me and began my explanation. A friend of mine saw a vampire there that matched your description. He said she was as short as me, or just slightly smaller, with bright blonde hair and very pretty. I thought it might have been you. Well, that was certainly nice of your friend to say. She seemed thrown by the description. Yes, I went with my brother Alec, Dimitri, and Felix. Only 4. There was no need for more. But, I heard there were almost 20 newborns. Alec and I have particularly powerful gifts. She replied somewhat smugly. What can you do? I can make one think they are experiencing debilitating pain. I am far too curious for my own good. Would you like to see if it works on me? Of course it will work, you foolish human. She nearly overturned the chair as she rose sharply. I will not disrespect my masters by damaging their guest. Jane, I promise I didn't mean to offend you. Your gift works on the mind, right? I don't think it will work on me. Her brows furrowed for a few moments before, I assume, she made her decision and shrugged. Very well, mortal. Arrow will be able to see that I was only giving you what you requested. Pain. She whispered the final word. I waited. Nothing. Yes. One more power thwarted. Score for the human. How is that possible? I threw my head back in a silent laugh. I have no idea, Jane. I scribbled quickly. But, you are not the first. I've known a vampire who could read the current thoughts in anyone's mind, but he couldn't read me. Pinero? Pinero what? Master Arrow can't see every thought you've ever had by touching your skin. Do you think he's tried? I saw him carrying you when he took you to the hospital. I've no doubt he made contact with your skin at that time. But you don't know if it worked. I have not inquired, no. I can't wait to find out. She shook her head with a slight smile. You're strange. At that moment Jonna returned bearing brioche and coffee. Perfect. Jane glared at the other woman until she left the room. She really must have something against Jonna. So Jane, tell me about yourself. 0000000000000. That will be all, Heidi. Inform me when you have completed your task. Yes sir, she replied and swept from the room. It will be interesting to see what fits Heidi's idea of classic and demure. What can I do for you, Alec? I asked the elite guard as he approached. Jane sends word that Miss Isabella has eaten and seen her rooms. Isabella was, I quote, floored, whatever that means, and has decided to rest a while on her, again I quote, mattress from heaven. Jane says she will remain with Miss Isabella until she is known to the entire guard. Unless you would have her do otherwise. No, that is quite alright. I'm surprised and pleased Jane has made the offer. It usually takes her much longer to warm up to those who are new in the castle. Jane seemed quite happy conversing with Miss Isabella when I checked in on them. It seems she actually likes the girl. Will Miss Isabella be staying? That is the plan. We intend to offer her a permanent invitation. Changing has not been discussed. We would like to get to know her better before that conversation, but she will certainly be changed if that her desire. He seemed happy with that information. He cares deeply about his sister's happiness. Many vampires are wary of her due to her formidable gift, and yet she is making fast friends with our new resident human. Miracles never cease. Be sure the full guard is assembled at 7 this evening. We will introduce our honored guest at that time. Alex seems nice, Jane. He can be. She returned, with a slight eye roll. I will leave you to your rest now. I will be in the corridor, should you need anything. Before I could try to stop her from waiting outside like a sentry, she was gone. I sighed. Talking with Jane had been very interesting. She provided me with a viewpoint that I'm sure is fairly unique among the Volturi Guard. Shunned by most, from either her apparent age or her ability, she has managed to earn a soft spot with the kings. She told me of Ruthless Arrow's well-known love for all things unusual. Which, I'm positive, is one of the reasons they haven't killed me yet. Who stabs themselves to pour blood into a vampire's mouth, after all? She also told me how he takes time each week to talk to her and how he encourages her pursuits, whether they be the arts or intellectual study. She knows that this attention only serves to further estrange her from some of the others in the guard, but she would not change it. We spoke briefly of the cause of Marcus's centuries-long melancholy, but it didn't seem right to share idle gossip about such a devastating loss. She did tell me that before, when he still had his wife and soulmate did him, that he was quite the artist and promised to show me the pieces throughout the castle that were painted by him. She says he has been known to help her with her painting when she finds a style difficult to master. Her account of Caius only serves to confuse me. She shared that of all the kings, Caius is the most violent and the most likely to condemn a vampire to death for breaking the rules. She went on to tell me that he has never once shown interest in a human outside of finding a meal and has never been known to hide his disdain for my species in general. Jane has known him far longer than I have, but aside from either not speaking at all or being somewhat snappish, he has not shown any indication that he thinks less of me for being a human. Since he's been out of the cave, he's actually been quite nice to me. My mind can't seem to mesh the two sides into one vampire. Perhaps it's only gratitude. I do know I am not looking forward to the day Caius returns to business as usual. He is most likely accepting my presence as a means to an end to get the information he wants. I know that my life will most likely end once they have satiated their curiosity, but I have known for years of that possibility. That knowledge will not stop me from enjoying the comforts they are offering in the meantime. I cross the dark wood floor of the room I've been given for the remainder of my stay. It is simply beautiful. Before now, I didn't know that a room could be undeniably grand without being ostentatious. The walls are a soft glowing creamy white. Now normally, I like more color. It is clear, however, that the focus of this room is obviously the architecture and not the decor. The majority of the color is found by looking up. Beautiful blues, greens, and golds decorate the multitude of squares covering the entire ceiling. The walls are smooth, accented with finely carved moldings and panels of decorative wood trim. The arched windows, with their brilliant moss green curtains, are cased in the same dark wood as the floor, as well as the mantel surrounding the small fireplace directly across from the bed. Nestled around the fireplace is a cozy conversation area, with two cream-colored armchairs and a small pale green sofa with carved arms and feet. On one side of the bed is a bedside table, and on the other, a large wardrobe cabinet that is probably worth a small fortune. It is gorgeous. As for the bed, I have fallen hopelessly and irrevocably in love. It is finished in a medium dark brown, with carved panels making up the entire base. 4 massive spiraling posts then rise up to support another rectangle of carved panels, seemingly crowning the bed. From this crown hangs drapes of moss green, echoing the window panels, yet embroidered with ivory and shining gold. The bedspread is a luminous ivory, trimmed in the same embroidery accents, in gold and green. When I had first hauled myself into the bed to assure a snickering Jane and Alec that I could manage very well without a stool, I was amazed that a bed could feel so luxurious. It is supportive and pillowy at the same time, creating a perfect cradle for my, too old for its physical age, body. Many of my past injuries still cause me aches and pains, especially in cool months. Now, without my audience, I climb once more into my personal heaven of a bed and succumb to the call of sleep, not at all ashamed to be napping in the middle of the day like a child. Who would be, with a bed like this? I woke slowly, only aware of being amazingly comfortable. The thick numbness of sleep still trying to pull me into its embrace. At this point, I am more than willing to comply. I have no idea what day it is or why I've been asleep during the day, judging by the level of sunlight flooding the backs of my eyelids. All I know is that I feel more rested at this moment than I have in months, possibly longer. I feel a small smile creep across my face. Here in this in-between, not in the void of unconsciousness, but also not fully aware of the world around me, I feel at peace. I hold on to this feeling tightly and soak it up. If there's one thing I've learned from past experience, it's that peace never lasts. A low voice pulls me through the final stage of my passage to awareness. The words are so soft, I'm not sure they are meant for me to hear. And with only a smile, she brings the mighty to their knees. I turn in the direction of the voice and see Marcus. His whole body screams of his deeply rooted sadness. I had noticed it earlier, but at the time, didn't know the cause. I recognized it from my own heartbreaks. However, not even I can identify with the depth of despair that surrounds him like a cloak. I snapped up into a sitting position. I am sorry to disturb your rest. I came to see if I may request a favor of you. As I scooted to the edge of the bed, Marcus approached and offered his hand to help me down. I retrieved my notebook from the bedside table. Yes, of course. Thank you, Isabella. The guard will assemble this evening at 7. We do not want any accidents to occur during your stay, so with every vampire present, we will introduce you as a special guest of the castle. It will make a more powerful impression if you are appropriately attired. I couldn't decide if I felt embarrassed that I didn't own anything that would fall into the appropriate category when compared to the fine clothing worn by the kings, or worried that I would disappoint their expectations. What time is it? I might have time to buy something from one of the local shops. I have a little money still set aside for a rainy day. Why tonight? Why not tomorrow? My head began spinning, trying to iron out my options as quickly as possible. He must have seen the worry on my face or heard my heart begin to accelerate because he quickly continued. I know you were not forewarned about this evening and have come to stay with us also quite unexpectedly, with nothing save the clothing you currently wear in your possession. Isabella, you would do me a great honor if you would allow me to provide your attire for the evening. He spoke while moving to retrieve a garment bag from a nearby chair. I believe you will find everything you need here. Call for Jane when you are ready to dress. She will help with your preparations. I was stunned that he had brought me an entire outfit to wear for this evening. Where did he even get it on such short notice? Do the volturi keep wardrobes full of clothes just sitting around? I don't even care what it looks like. I'm sure it will be much nicer than I would have been able to get for myself, especially with such short notice. I smiled widely as I showed him my ecstatic written appreciation as well. A very small smile lifted the corners of his mouth briefly. Until this evening then, Isabella. He said softly, just before ghosting out of the room. Jane entered just moments later. Her eyes were as wide as mine, and she let loose the squeal that desperately wanted to leap from my silent throat. Master Marcus brought you an outfit. After we collected ourselves, she continued. Shall we take a look? At my emphatic nod, she opened the garment bag on the bed. Jane gasped as I stood there with my mouth open in astonishment. Inside was the most beautiful gown I have ever seen in person. I pulled it completely out of the bag to get a better look. The fabric is deep blue velvet, fitted in the bodice and blending into a full floor-length skirt. The neckline is almost a triangle, more narrow at the opening of the neck, widening as it goes down, then cut straight across the bust. I hope it isn't too revealing. The sleeves look to hit around the elbow, and the neckline and sleeve cuffs both showcase intricate silver embroidery. It is simple, but striking. I cannot believe I get to wear this fabulous dress tonight. Inside the bag is another, rather large piece of fabric. It's a cloak. The same deep blue as the dress but completely covered with swirling silver embroidery. The only space not completely covered is the center of the back. Here the swirls mesh together to form a circle, holding the image of a single flower. As I run my hand over the intricate detail of this, most likely custom-made, cloak, I notice that Jane has been completely silent since we first saw the dress. I turn to see that she is standing frozen, with an unreadable look on her face. Her eyes almost appear to be glistening. I reach out to put my hand on her shoulder and give her a questioning look when she finally turns her bright red eyes to me. She takes a deep breath and lets it out slowly. This is Isabella. She begins, and I have to stop myself from writing to insist she drop the miss. I'm sure you don't realize what this dress means. She trailed off, seemingly needing to arrange her thoughts. For you to be offered this dress shows that you are truly esteemed by the kings. By wearing this, you will be seen as ranking just below the kings in importance and higher than any guard. At this point I could hold back no longer. Scratching away in my notebook, I finally got out all my questions. What do you mean? How do you know this? Why treat me with such deference? I'm nothing to them. I'm just a human, fully expendable and tasty besides. I thought they only wanted me for information. This. She began, before my glare cut her off. Fine then, Isabella. I do not know why they choose to elevate you with such distinction. I only know that it is their right and they have the power to make it so. I know the meaning of this dress because I have seen it before. I knew the vampire it was made for. This, she said pointing to the flower, was her favorite flower. It is a lotus. She believed they represent life emerging pure and hopeful from darkness and adversity. This dress and cloak belonged to Didim. I have acquired everything you requested, Master Caius, and delivered the items, plus a tray of fruit, bread and cheese, to Miss Isabella's room, although Jane would not allow me to enter. I tried my best not to laugh at the exasperated vampire in front of me. It appears Jane does not wish to share her new friend. I'm sure Heidi would have preferred to personally show off the spoils of her shopping conquest. Oh yes, here are the books you sent for. Trying not to display my excitement over the small pile of books, I thanked her for her prompt work and dismissed her. After her departure, I retreated once more to my study and settled into one of the armchairs facing the fireplace. I looked through the materials Heidi had acquired as I ruminated once more on all the questions I have about the tough little human who is currently worming her way into some previously barricaded hearts in the castle. I need to know her story. I need to know who she is and what events brought her to existing comfortably in the presence of a castle full of vampires. Now, let's see how fast this old vampire can learn a new trick. Carlisle will be here by midday tomorrow. One of his sons accompanies him for this visit. Do you think it wise, Arrow, to let the outside world become aware of the interest we have in Isabella? I know we need not fear Carlisle spreading information, but what of the other he brings with him? It will all be well, Brother Marcus, you will see. We will have a short chat with the two of them, then a handshake, and I believe we will have enough information to decide if they are safe for Isabella. Marcus sighed as he stared, unseeing, out the window of the library they were currently occupying. You do not agree? I trust your judgment, Arrow. I'm sure you will see what we need to know. I was thinking of the girl. I heard you provided her a gown for this evening. That was very well done, brother. I had not thought of the matter myself. She has certainly become a fantastic diversion for us all. It is more than that, Arrow. I know you see it too. The girl would almost definitely be a gifted immortal. No doubt. She can block my trespassing into her mind as a human. She could only become more powerful as a vampire. I have a suspicion that shielding might only be the beginning. Marcus replied vaguely, his eyes drifting to a large portrait on the wall. What do you mean? Arrow asked, genuinely interested. He was unable to help himself. Finding gifted vampires has been his passion for many millennia. I am feeling things, Arrow, Marcus began slowly, that I have not felt in more years than I care to count. I am concerned for the girl, which on its own is unusual. However, there is something more. He ran his fingers along the frame of the painting that held his eyes. It's too slight a sensation to positively determine at the moment, but it almost feels that by merely being in her presence, she is pouring healing water over my very soul. The searing pain of losing my heart is still there, but for the first time in 1,000 years, the burden does not seem quite as heavy as it did before. I think she will have an ability similar to yours, my love. He whispered to the woman on the canvas. I think her gift is healing, happiness. He paused for a moment before adding, peace. Supernatural mind working furiously to recall all I'd read this afternoon, I knocked on Isabella's door. Jane opened it and after a quick reading followed by a gleaming smile, larger than I have ever seen on her face, she flitted off to change into her formal robes. When my eyes find Isabella, my chest constricts tightly. I suck in a deep breath, trying to dispel some of the tension. I had thought her beautiful only just this morning, under harsh fluorescent lighting and in the same clothes she had worn trekking through the forest to aid me in the cave. But now, freshly scrubbed, in a gown suiting her figure and with her voluminous hair braided into an elegant crown, thus keeping it from obscuring her face and the curve of her neck, she is arrestingly magnificent. The deep blue of the dress makes her creamy skin glow in the candlelight. She is wearing no jewelry, nor does she need it. Her cheeks redden slightly, and she begins wringing her hands. Apparently I've been standing silent too long. I hope I get this right. Raising my hands and moving them in ways previously unfamiliar to me, I make my first attempt. You look beautiful. I told her. I think. Judging by the gleeful expression that overtook her face, I must have done my part correctly. Thank you, Your Majesty. You look handsome this evening as well. She returned, tiny hands flying through the motions. May I escort you? Of course, I would be most grateful. She returned cheerfully. She started to pick up the cloak that matches her dress, but I reached it first. I stood in front of her and swirled it around her body so draped it across her shoulders and fastened the silver lotus clasp in front. As the two pieces came together, my fingers brushed a portion of the angry scar tissue on her throat and I noticed that the clasp would lay across some of it as well. Will you be uncomfortable with the cloak resting here? I asked, temporarily forgetting to remove my fingers from where they had wrapped loosely around the base of her neck, my thumbs having fallen to her collarbones. She did not reply right away. Her pulse drummed against my hands in an ever-increasing tempo. I searched her eyes for any sign of fear. It is possible that one as brave as Isabella could still be intimidated by a predator in such close proximity, but I saw none. What is going on in that mind of hers? She blinked deliberately, shook her head and stepped out of my grasp before signing. No, do not worry. It does not hurt. Do we have time for me to ask you about a couple of things? Absolutely. You are the guest of honor. Jane mentioned something that made me curious. She started, and I tracked and translated her movements as quickly as I was able. She said, by your actions, you the kings have placed me in a position of high regard. How is this determined and what have I done to deserve this consideration? Well, I don't want to tell her there is probably no logical explanation for our collective interest in her. I brought you here and therefore am responsible for your welfare while you remain with us. I stumbled through the signs, having to spell some words letter by letter. By having you reside in my personal wing of the castle, I have placed you formally under my protection. At this, her eyes went wide and her mouth fell open slightly. I guess she didn't already know that tidbit. Marcus, by providing you with this ensemble, I indicated her gown, which everyone here knows to be especially dear to him, shows his unconditional support of your stay as well. None in the castle will question your right to be here in the face of such blatant favor from not one, but two, of their kings. She mulled this over for a moment before nodding, I assume reaching the conclusion that my reasoning is sound. But why? Because we are drawn to you. I wanted to say, but settled for you saved a Volturi king. Let that be enough for now. She took my arm when I offered it this time, and together we made our way toward the throne room to await her introduction. Belapov. I never liked the idea of dressing up for social events like homecoming or prom while I was in high school. It seemed silly, like playing princess for the evening merely pretending to be someone special. The one time I was conned into participating, I felt like an absolute imposter. Tonight, however, wearing this remarkably fine gown, I felt like I could actually be a fine lady. Marcus had not guilted me into dressing this way. He merely pointed out that it needed to be done to help cement my place in their coven. I have been treated respectfully by these vampires, not like a silly human incapable of higher brain function, and it has made all the difference in the world. Jane's exit from my room left the door standing wide, and I saw Caius really saw him. In the cave, all that registered was that he was frighteningly torn apart and did not appear to be improving. Only the need help him stayed in the forefront of my mind. His features hardly mattered. In the hospital, I was honestly astonished to wake up at all. He could have killed me easily, but instead, had me cared for. The next surprise came when I realized a king was inviting me to his home. Yes, I knew who he was, and I guessed, correctly, they were going to want information before my use came to its end. The knight is dressed in a finely tailored raven black suit that contrasts sharply with his skin now clear of lacerations and his smooth pale hair. His shirt and tie are also black, and though I have heard descriptions of men wearing all black before, I had no idea the effect could be so incredibly impressive. His figure, standing tall and powerfully lean in the doorway, suddenly reminded me that here stood not just a vampire king, but a remarkably handsome man who was inexplicably still standing stationary, staring back at me. Caius's somewhat dumbfounded reaction was extremely flattering. I felt my cheeks heat and tried to put these thoughts aside. They would surely do me no good. Traitorous emotions burned furiously in my chest: hope, excitement, and gratitude when his hands first formed awkward words and letters during his sign language debut. He could have simply spoken the words, yes. Both complimenting me and showing the effort he had expended in such a short time, however, was truly and deeply moving. I will not fall for another vampire. I will not fall for another vampire. If this has to become my personal go-to mantra, then so be it. Once was enough to show me that I don't fit into this world long-term. On this handsome and surprisingly thoughtful king's arm, I am led to a small, stone-walled room. It is surprisingly empty. Before I can ask, Caius leans down to speak lowly in my ear. We are situated directly behind the thrones. Arrow will have heard the door we just closed and should announce you shortly. Do not fear, this will not take long, and you may remain beside me, if that is your wish. Yes, that sounds fantastic. Clinging tightly to his arm will be far less obvious than nervously wringing my hands in front of who knows how many vampires. I nod once firmly to accept his proposition. Not even a minute later, Caius hears what he was waiting for. He opened the throne room door and slowly led me through. Once inside, I heard the end of Arrow's introduction. Guest Miss Isabella Swan. I had never before been in a room with so many people that was still completely silent. It was unnerving to say the least. The only audible breath drawn was my own, and the only other sound was the gentle swish of my skirt as we made our way around to the front of the three imposing thrones. I unconsciously squeezed Caius's arm with my left hand, and he responded by pulling his arm in closer, gently squeezing my forearm to his side. At last we made it to the front of Caius's own throne. We remained facing the other two kings, while Arrow brought forth the beautiful woman standing to his right. "My dear Isabella," he began dramatically, which I understand from Jane is the norm for him, "may I present to you, my lovely wife Sulpicia." She is a tall, finely featured woman with an oval face, framed by deep, brown, shoulder-length hair, curled into gentle waves. To be honest, she looked bored with the proceedings, but greeted me with a kind smile and a welcome Isabella before retiring to her previous position. "Now, the guard will come forth for presentation," Arrow commanded. One by one, they approached me and offered a short polite bow, as they were named. First came Jane, who flashed me a cheeky grin, followed by Alec. Next he called Felix, Dimitri, Heidi and Chelsea. Goodness, I need a list to memorize. The last names I registered were Afton, Corin, Renata and Santiago. There were at least 15 others, possibly closer to 20, but I could not remember any more of the unfamiliar names. As you are all aware, Arrow continued once all the vampires had returned to their places, Miss Isabella is a guest of your king's and as such, will be treated respectfully at all times. Her needs will be seen to immediately, much as you would heed myself or my brothers. No deviation from your king's wishes on this matter will be tolerated. You are dismissed. Wow, talk about short and sweet. Once all the guard had departed, I signed to Caius. Will they not resent being ordered to play nice with the human? A wry smile broke out on his face and he started to reply just as Arrow, having seen the interaction exclaimed, brother. You understand that form of communication? Arrow's red eyes were bright with an almost manic excitement. His hands he held pressed together, the tips of his pointer fingers barely grazing his lower lip. He really is easy to get wound up any new thing and he's like a kid in a candy shop. I studied from mid-morning on, today. Caius replied. It was enough to get a grasp of the concept. Some of her signs are too complex for me currently, but I understood her to be inquiring of the guard's probable feelings about your proclamation this evening. Surprisingly, it was Sulpicia who answered first. Be not concerned, Isabella. We have only the most loyal involved so closely in our lives. They trust and respect their kings implicitly. The desires of their kings quickly become the desires of their own hearts. CPOV. Marcus stepped forward, speaking softly. You look truly lovely this evening, Isabella. Have you enjoyed your first day in the castle? As she responded, I spoke her words aloud. I have. Thank you. You all have been most gracious in your hospitality. Who may I thank for the large delivery of clothing and other items to my room earlier today? Bella, Isabella, Arrow crooned indulgently, and I noticed her slight flinch as he began to speak. We would not have your stay suffer from lack of provisions. It is a privilege we all share to see you with all you require, he finished soberly, as we would any friend. Looking down upon her face, I saw moisture glistening in her eyes and decided to change the subject. She obviously needed to regain her composure after Arrow's uncharacteristically heartfelt statement. Speaking of requirements, is it not time for your evening meal? The look she gave me left me with no doubt that she knew exactly what I was doing and appreciated it anyway. I could eat. She told me. Brothers, if you will excuse us, Isabella and I will seek out her dinner and rejoin you afterward. They called out their affirmations as I escorted her to the small kitchen. BPOV. After eating a bowl of thick piping hot stew, Caius and I agreed that now was as good a time as any to share my vampire history with the brothers. Due to the hour, we met in my room, utilizing the cozy furniture grouping in front of my fireplace. Arrow and Marcus each took a chair, while Caius seated himself on the sofa with me. He angled his body so that he had a clear view of my hands, laying his right arm upon the back of the couch. In the past, you have been called by the nickname Bella, have you not? Caius asked without preamble. As always, hearing that name sent a painful jolt through my heart. How did you know? I asked him, not bothering to confirm or deny anything he obviously already knew. You have been, for the most part, calm and content in our presence. He spoke matter-of-factly. 2 times, however, I have witnessed an odd reaction. The first time, Arrow referred to you and your name being beautiful. I was confused why such a compliment might make you sad. Then tonight, I observed you stiffen momentarily when Arrow once more used the word Bella. I concluded that it was not the Italian word for beautiful that bothered you so, but perhaps an old nickname for Isabella. My eyes widened slightly in surprise. His observational skills are astounding. Yes, I locked my gaze with his intense questioning, red eyes. I was. All my life I was known as Bella, I continued, swallowing a lump that had formed in my throat. Until no one that knew me by that name remained in my life. I'm thankful for Caius's voice relaying my words. I can tell already, my shaking hands would not have been able to write legibly for long. As I told you before, I dated a vampire. When I first met him, he appeared to hate me, glaring darkly at me before he finally left in a hurry. I saw nothing of him for a full week afterward. He came back to the area, but avoided my company for months. One icy day, I was almost crushed by a van, skidding across the parking lot. Just after I heard the squealing tires, I looked up and saw him, standing across the parking lot. I remember thinking his face was the last I would see before I died. Arrow, getting high on the drama of the situation, was now sitting on the edge of his seat, his hands gripping the arms. Instead, faster than I could follow, he was there. His hand stopped the van, while his other arm prevented most of my impact with the concrete parking lot. I still hit my head, but compared to losing my life, it was nothing. I had no idea why he'd saved me. Immediately after, he seemed to dislike me as much, if not more, than before. I knew what he had done was not normal, but I kept my mouth shut about what really happened. Gradually, he started making small talk with me, and after a few minor disagreements, we decided to be tentative friends. While shopping in a small nearby city, I got lost in a bad part of town. 4 men began perusing me, clearly stating their intentions. Before I knew it, I was cornered. They continued closing in, and there was nothing I could do to get away. All 3 vampires were now growling lowly. Caius was having a difficult time speaking clearly to his brothers because of the angry rattling of his chest. My sometimes friend saved me again. He showed up in the nick of time to whisk me away from danger. The kings calmed considerably after gaining knowledge of my rescue. By this point, unknown to him, I had discovered his deep dark secret. The more time I had spent with him, the more I had noticed no interest in food, extremely pale, perfect skin, incredible strength, eyes that varied in color, and skin that was always cool to the touch. Back then, I had a friend of tribal upbringing who liked to try and scare me with ghost stories and spooky legends. During one of his stories, all the pieces just snapped together. My 2-time savior was a vampire. Said vampire was not happy when I told him what I knew that I didn't care. It didn't matter to me what he was. He didn't have to save me from either situation, but he did. We began our relationship. I fell hard. He was my first everything boyfriend, kiss, dance, love. Even without speaking the words, I felt like I was choking from them. I drew in a shuddering breath. This bite, I motioned to the bite on my wrist, came from a nomad James. He found it interesting that I was in the company of a vampire who did not intend to eat me and had not turned me. James decided to hunt me for sport. He drew me out of hiding by telling me he had my mother that he would trade her life for mine. Not willing to dismiss his claims and potentially sacrifice my mother, I slipped away to meet him. After tossing me around like a rag doll, using my body to smash most of the mirrors in the ballet studio we occupied, and breaking my leg, he bit me. In a way I was relieved. To stay with my boyfriend, I would have eventually had to change anyway. I took a moment to wipe a stray tear away. I realized, right then in the ballet studio, that at that point Edward didn't love me enough to want me forever. It was a painful realization, and the only thing that kept my heart from breaking was the hope that I could change his mind in time. Before the change could really begin, my boyfriend sucked the venom out. He had already located us and killed James. I begged him to just let it happen, but he wouldn't. More tears were falling now and I was too tired to stop them. Marcus suggested that we break for the night and continue in the morning. They all rose silently, leaving the room with not another word spoken. CPOV. Caius, stop. Those 2 calm, authoritative words reached me through the haze that had been clouding my mind. As I came back to myself, I noticed that I had Arrow by the throat. Both of our suits were hanging in shreds from our bodies, and I had healing injuries on my face, chest and left leg. I apologize, brother, I breathed as I released him. I do not know what came over me. Oh, I know very well what came over you, for somewhat of the same happened to me, and as we were both in need of an outlet. The asinine smile on Arrow's face told me that he assumed he'd be quickly forgiven for purposely provoking me. In truth, I did feel somewhat better, but not fully. How much of an idiot would one have to be to stop a change like that? I roared, unable to hold back any longer. He could have killed her, and for what? To prevent her becoming immortal. That is the best thing that could have happened to her. He did save her from the van and those goons, brother, or have you forgotten? Marcus applied, unhelpfully in my opinion. It makes no difference. I snapped. He undid any good he may have done by not letting her change. He hurt her deeply with his actions. You saw her. Yes. They both agreed somberly. I need some air. Excuse me, brothers. I had not fully admitted it to myself, but the part that currently unsettled me the most was wondering if her tears were caused by remembrance of past pain or current longing for the vampire from her past. An emotion, previously unfamiliar to me, began to take hold in the back of my mind: jealousy. BPOV. I looked out over a clear blue lake, my bare feet planted in the fine white sand that made up the shore. Gentle waves lapped at my toes. Suddenly the water began to churn and a voice reached my ears. This is your fault. My father's face became visible through the, now angrily rolling, water. I tried to turn away. No matter how fast my feet moved through the sand, I made no progress. The water began to turn red. It stained my toes, then my feet in their fruitless struggle to leave the horror behind me. The red climbed higher and higher, beginning to creep up my legs now, as my father's voice repeated, your fault, all your fault. Just before I gave up, allowing my body to be devoured by this bloody judgment, a blinding white light obscured my vision. Though I couldn't see, through the clean bright light, a different voice called to me. Come, Isabella. I will free you. I reached desperately in the direction of the voice, and when I finally gripped the strong hand extended to save me, my nightmare melted away, and I felt peace. CPOV. Just past dawn the next morning, I heard a knock on my door. Of course her heartbeat gave her away, but it pleased me immensely that she would seek me out on her own. I opened the door to find her looking well-rested, dressed in dark jeans, ankle-high boots, and a very becoming plum sweater which highlighted that tiny ring of green in her lovely brown eyes. "Good morning, Milady," I greeted, offering her a sweeping bow. "I trust you slept well." "For the most part, thank you," she replied with just a hint of rosiness rising in her cheeks. "You start your day early. Are you so eager to spend your day with a demon?" She quirked an eyebrow and considered me carefully before answering. "A demon you may be, but you are not evil." Unable to stop myself from responding to such a challenge, I stalked toward her slowly. "So sure of that, are you?" I spoke, holding my mouth barely a hair's width from her pulsing throat. "Angels such as yourself do not always recognize the danger before they dance with a demon," I whispered, circling her petite frame. I felt my eyes darken as she held her ground, not a trace of fear to be found. She took in my now black eyes, for though I'd only been toying with her, the predator does love to come out and play. "I've already cut my wrist for you, what else do you require to be certain that I see you for who and what you are?" Her smile belied the seriousness of her words. "You wound me?" I cried, placing a hand upon my unbeating heart. "Of course I could require nothing more than the most generous gift of your life's blood." Gently lifting her right hand with my own, I looked upon the healing cut there. "Except perhaps, another taste." I teased her with a smirk. Her face flushed a deep red and I had to bite back a growl when I heard footsteps approaching from just down the corridor, cutting short the time I had with her all to myself. "Master Caius, Miss Isabella," Jane greeted as she drew closer. "I came to inform Isabella that her breakfast has been prepared." "Very well, if it is agreeable to you, Miss Swan, we will continue last night's discussion in the solarium once you have broken your fast. Jane can show you the way." Her color had now returned to its normal shade and she quickly accepted my plans before practically running off with Jane. "POV. You mentioned a friend saw us when we dealt with the newborns in Washington?" Jane asked as I speared a piece of fruit with my fork. "Breakfast this morning consisted of a large apple farro muffin, a cup of yogurt and fresh mixed fruit." She immediately produced a notebook and waited impatiently for my reply. "Yes." She huffed at my response before continuing her mini interrogation. "After further consideration, I do not see how that is possible. There were no humans and no other vampires left in the area when we were finished." "Well, that's simple, Jane. He's a wolf." Upon reading my words, she began pacing the room, her form coming close to being nothing but a black and blonde blur. "A werewolf?" she spluttered. "You cannot befriend a werewolf. They are horrible beasts. Does Master Caius know there are werewolves in North America? They should be extinct in that area. He will want to see to this immediately." I had to grab at her sleeve as she started past me to show her the words I had written in large bold letters, plus underlined 3 times during her rant. "No. A shapeshifter." That stopped her dead in her tracks. She plopped back down into her abandoned chair and with her head cocked to one side, a truly puzzled expression on her face, she blurted. "The what?" "CPOV. My brothers and I were already in the solarium when Isabella arrived with Jane. I enjoyed seeing the wonder on her lovely face as she took in the large circular room with walls and ceiling made of glass. A beam of sunlight fell upon the gashes that marred her pale throat. I was impatiently biding my time, waiting for their cause to be disclosed. If they were made by any living being, be it human or creature, their life would be forfeit. At least she no longer felt the need to hide them from us. Her gaze lowered to the gray stone floor, swept over the various planters full of lush local greenery at full bloom despite the cooler temperatures outside, and finally landed on the stone benches along the outer wall where Arrow, Marcus and I awaited her. After thanking Jane, she took an open seat next to Marcus, which caused me inner turmoil, yet again. I wanted her nearer to me, but had no reason to presume to keep her to myself. I suppose the seating was fortuitous, as it gave me a better view to translate, however that hardly consoled this new unfamiliar selfishness festering inside me. POV. The Kings greeted me kindly, as always. Marcus even asked if I was sure I felt up to continuing my story today. I reached over and squeezed his cool hand briefly, obviously surprising to him, but which brought about a slight warming of his expression, which was an improvement to his normally dour demeanor. I steeled myself, plastering a fake smile on my face to assure them of my willingness to share once more, and began. "So, my vampire sucked the venom out. He later told me that it wasn't because he didn't love me." A small bitter snort escaped me at the thought. "It was because he didn't want to damn my soul." I looked up to see Caius rolling his eyes in apparent exasperation. I completely understood that sentiment. So many times Edward and I had argued that point, and every time he had refused to consider the situation from my point of view. He treated me like a child incapable of making important life decisions. Our relationship was strained from there on out. I was constantly questioning whether I was good enough for him. No matter what he said, I couldn't help but feel that if he loved me as much as he said, he would want me changed. He seemed to constantly be looking for a reason to leave. My heart began to ache, remembering begging and pleading with him not to leave me. The damage already forming within my mind and heart at the thought that he could be gone at any moment and there was nothing I could do, weak pathetic human that I am, to stop him. He finally got his chance after the spectacular failure of my unwanted 18th birthday party. Unwanted? Asked Arrow, confusion showing plainly on his expressive face. Yes, my birthday has never been an important occasion to me, just another day of the year. But his family, especially his sister, wanted to throw one for me. The moment Caius translated the word family, all three kings stiffened and exchanged an enigmatic glance. They did not speak, so I continued on. I cut myself on an envelope. One of his brothers lunged for me. He was stopped, but not before my boyfriend panicked and shoved me back. I tripped, smashing into a table of glass plates, slicing my arm on the newly broken glass. But the smell of my free-flowing blood permeating the room, most of the family had to leave the house. I was mortified and angry at the same time. If they had just respected my wishes for once, none of it would have happened. A few days later, he asked me to walk with him in the woods. He told me that he and his family were leaving. I thought he meant for me to come too. A small silent sob escaped me, the memory is still fresh, even 3 years later. His face was cold and his eyes were hard when he told me that he was tired of trying to be something he was not. He didn't want to continue playing human. I wasn't good for him and never would be. He tore my heart in half and left me alone in the forest. Tears streamed down my cheeks and I let them fall. Isabella, I realize this is hard for you, Marcus spoke gently as he placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. However, we must know. What is the name of this family of vampires? I raised my hands to answer, reluctant to share the name of my, one-time, surrogate family. I didn't want to bring them any trouble, even though they'd literally left me to die. I think I might need to reconsider my relationship with my moral code. My hands began to form the letters just as I heard Jane approach and apologize to the kings. I'm sorry, masters, your guests are a bit early. I turned my head in the direction of the newcomers and froze. They're looking back at me, sparking a very familiar pain, were the golden eyes I'd only ever seen in one group of vampires. The Cullens. CPOV. My brothers and I shared a look when Isabella mentioned this mystery vampire belonging to a family. There are a very limited number of vampires that refer to themselves as a family instead of a coven. I knew the likely answer before she began to form the word. If I'm correct, it will devastate Arrow. Her hand had just formed a C when Jane entered, with none other than Carlisle Cullen. Isabella's reaction was all the confirmation I needed. She looked as if she had been physically struck. Her breath came out in a whoosh, her heart stuttered dramatically, and her already pale complexion paled even farther. Suddenly, a debilitating pain seemed to sweep the room. My brothers and I each clasped a hand to our chests. The pain was agonizing, like a white-hot brand searing through my heart, burning mercilessly. I looked to Jane. Had her powers escalated? No, she is afflicted as well. As quickly as it began, the pain was snapped away. I took a few breaths to steady myself before shouting. What the hell was that? The tall, scarred vampire alongside Carlisle stepped forward. I apologize. I have the ability to feel and project emotions. I was overwhelmed for a moment. Overwhelmed by what? I demanded, still not understanding the attack he unleashed upon us. Bella's feelings when she spotted. He was still speaking, but I heard no more, for there it was, further confirmation of my suspicions. He had called her Bella. I looked to her to find a panicked Marcus kneeling in front of her, his hands on her cheeks. But she didn't appear to see him. Her eyes were lifeless, and she looked to be nothing more than an animated corpse sitting upon a stone bench. There was none of the strength and vitality we had come to know from this slip of a girl. Carlisle, having recovered from the obvious shock of seeing her, in Volterra no less, stepped forward and tried to address her. Bella, are you? A low growl met his approach. Astonishing us, who knew him so well, Marcus swept Isabella up. He then cradled her gently, his rumbling warning never ceasing, and immediately exited the solarium, leaving 5 shocked and speechless vampires in his wake. Note. Bella was upset last chapter, but to those who have expressed concern, fear not. She will not be moping around for large amounts of time, feeling sorry for herself. Her pain is a culmination of memories, feelings ranging from the breakup with Edward, missing the Cullens, and the events following their departure, plus dealing with long-term loneliness. As always, those who left reviews are fantastic and incredibly inspiring. Just look at the size of this chapter. Thank you for your time. To me, this felt like the chapter that wouldn't end. There was so much more I planned to cover, but hopefully there is enough to pass muster. Please share your thoughts. Mistakes are mine. Feel free to point them out if you so desire. Marcus Pav. Emotions, denied for so long, were assaulting me mercilessly. I had to help her remove her from the source of so much pain. No doubt leaving my brothers either befuddled or bemused, I lifted Isabella and took her from the room. I have no interest in the Cullens at present. My only concern is seeing to this girl. All will be well. Trust in us, young one. We will see you through. I murmured to the silent young woman cradled in my arms as we traversed the most expedient route to her private chambers. Once inside her room, I sat upon the bed, placing my back to the headboard. Her head came to rest on my shoulder, the skin of her forehead pressed to my cheek, causing warmth to bleed into my face and neck. I draped her legs across mine and softly wrapped my arms around her. I can see it, child. I spoke lowly, keenly aware of the tension that riddled her small frame. I see the source of your pain. Real and deep it is indeed, though not without hope of recovery. You held, perhaps still hold, great love for each of the Cullens, a love that has been denied, left unfulfilled. I saw the withered connections when I first laid eyes on you. Just now, I both saw and felt the strained pulse of those damaged bonds burning your heart. The girl in my arms did not stir or speak, but I know she can hear me. The rhythm of her heartbeat fluctuates as I converse with her. I know all too well the pain that comes from losing a great love. I know you have been told of my didim. When I lost her, Isabella, only the fact that a vampire among the guard could manipulate relationships kept me from finding a way to destroy myself by binding me, with every ounce of her strength, to my brothers. That had still barely been enough. In time, I came to find a small measure of comfort by realizing that Arrow and Caius kept me here, not because they need me, but because they want me. They truly see me as their brother. Their steadfastness has pulled me from the brink of desolation and allowed my heart to begin healing in small ways. They have softened the jagged edges of my despair, making it not so impossible to live from day to day. There will never be another romantic love for me, but I am coming to see that perhaps I do have a measure of love too to give to those I acknowledge as family. Isabella, there is one I would like to add to that category if she would consent. At that, she finally stirred. I witnessed a tiny light enter her eyes as she turned her pleadingly hopeful face up just enough to catch my gaze. Indeed, there is no doubt in my mind that you are meant to be here, that fate herself has delivered you to us. You must try to trust in us, my dear. We shall not fail you. Her breath shuddered and increased in speed. As such, and not knowing if anyone has broached the topic with you, I would speak, so that you know without question that you have a home here, Isabella, for as long as you should desire it. Her heart thudded violently. I pledge to you now, on my honor, that we kings wholeheartedly desire your company and happiness, as long as you will bestow them upon us. She made an attempt to reach the notebook lying on her side table, so I procured it for her, along with her writing instrument. Human or vampire? She queried, an odd look painted across her face. Mortal or eternal, we would have you all of your days. I answered without hesitation. She swallowed thickly and drew in a tremulous breath as her brown eyes filled with unshed tears. Thank you. She replied simply, before resting her head once more on my shoulder, her small body finally releasing its tension. Ooh. Aropov. Fury, and if I were completely honest, disappointment, filled my being as I turned hard eyes on one of the few immortals ever to gain my trust, outside of my own coven. Carlyle, I sighed. You have been my friend for a very long time. In the past, our opinions have diverged spectacularly. Until recently, however, you have never given me reason to truly question your judgment. But before we come to those matters, please introduce us to your son. Of course, your majesty, he replied quickly. Arrow and Caius, kings of the Volturi, I respectfully present my son. Jasper, he said, indicating the vampire to his right. His surname by birth is Whitlock, Carlyle added. However, in our dealings with humans, he currently shares the name Hale with my daughter Rosalie. Jasper Whitlock is a name I am quite familiar with. I said, passing my eyes once more over the battle legend before me, a true destroyer, this one. It is a pleasure. I nodded my head to acknowledge him, and he respectfully dipped his in return. When reports reached Volterra of this vampire's disappearance at the height of the Southern Vampire Wars in North America, my brothers and I mused over what could have become of him. It was not a large enough concern at the time to investigate, but it seems now we will have our answers. Carlyle, if you would. My command was not disguised by the question in which it was presented. I held forth my hand and waited. As expected, he came forth expediently, only pausing to whisper, "I hope you can understand," before clasping my hand in his. In seconds, his entire life's memories played out before my eyes. I focused intently on the sections that involved Isabella. We will need this information if we are to make a fair judgment on this irksome situation. I see. I said, releasing him. My brothers and I have quite the discussion ahead of us. I turned to Jane, who was standing, still quite stunned, by the door. Dearest, please show Carlyle and Jasper to the guest quarters in the East Wing. Actually, wait just a moment. I must admit, mister, do you prefer Whitlock or Hale? I asked, turning to the leonine vampire beside Carlo. Either is fine, they both represent a part of who I am. He replied in a slow drawl. Excellent. Excellent. I cried, rubbing my hands together in anticipation. Now, I'm sure you can already tell, Mr. Whitlock. I am decidedly curious. I was hoping perhaps I trailed off, holding my palm forward slightly. The decision is yours, of course. I added, waiting to see his reaction. He took only a moment to weigh his thoughts. He stepped forward and touched the tip of his pointer finger to the center of my palm. I sucked in a deep breath, momentarily overcome with a maelstrom of violent memories and chaotic emotional experiences. Once the torrent subsided, I must admit I held more than a grudging respect for the scarred vampire in front of me. It would be better keep that tidbit to myself for the time being, however. Caius, who has been grinding his teeth since Isabella was taken from the room, would likely not take that information very well just now. Thank you, Mr. Whitlock. I appreciate the gesture and your perspective of the matter at hand. We will send for you both once we have discussed among ourselves. All I could think, as the two were led from the room, was, well, that changes everything. Ooh. Caius Pav. I stared in amazement as my quiet, emotionally dormant brother, at least he had been for the last 1,000 years, whisked Isabella away from the cause of her distress. The bemusement I felt over his response is one of the only reasons I didn't tear Carlisle Cullen apart right where he stood. The other reason was his son, if that beast could be referred to as anyone's son. The vampire is a billboard, flashing the word danger in bold lettering. I thought back to my conversation with Isabella in the cave, telling her that her scars should be worn with pride. If that rule holds true, this vampire's ego should be the size of the entire European continent. I am intrigued to see how he fits into this mess. I wouldn't have thought any human would survive long with this particular vampire around, but I see he shares the same golden eyes as his father. Intriguing. I waited impatiently for Arrow to finish gathering evidence. The sooner we counsel, the sooner the entire Cullen Coven will be wiped off the face of the earth and I can dance happily on their ashes. Once he dismissed Carlisle and Jasper, Arrow turned to me. Let us retrieve Marcus and inquire after Isabella. His voice tore me from my fantasies of lighting fire to the pieces of their disassembled bodies. We truly do have much to contemplate. Ooh. Carlisle Pav. Jasper's phone beeped to signify an incoming message just as we were closing the door to our rooms. After giving it a cursory glance, he passed it to me. Please tell Carlisle I'm so sorry I didn't warn him beforehand. I knew something of great importance to all our futures would happen on this trip. With this information, Carlisle would not have been able to refrain from asking Edward to come along and read thoughts. The outcome of that decision is not something I wish to speak of. Alice. I sighed as I read the message. I still don't know that the outcome of this situation will be even remotely favorable. We broke the law. We allowed a human to be a part of our life, our secret, and she is still alive and, more importantly, human. There is usually little mercy on this issue from the Volturi. My mind is still whirling from seeing Bella. She has matured so much since we saw her last. It's clear now that she is the case I was consulted for. The markings on her neck are vicious. I'm honestly astonished she lived after receiving them. Surely they were not a punishment from the kings for her knowledge of the vampire world. I have never known of any sentence beside the standard death or vampirism. Turning to Jasper, who had been staring listlessly out the window during my rumination, I voiced my concerns. You don't suppose they have harmed her, do you? Jasper shook his head slowly, causing his dirty blonde locks to sway gently, never taking his eyes off the city below. No, Carlisle, I felt many things in that room. He spoke slowly, his southern accent prominent, but there was no questioning the level of their genuine concern for her. I have a hunch their reaction was diluted due to their torn focus. Only a fraction of their feelings were focused on us. The worry and longing, I'd bet a pretty penny, definitely weren't for us. No, he sighed, a mournful sound, none of her pain was caused by them. But that statement, he clenched his hands into fists and was silent once more. I knew he was referring to the pain we caused her by separating ourselves from her life. There are so many things I don't understand. I know Edward truly misses her, that much is obvious. I almost don't recognize him anymore. But furthermore, to leave his mate is unfathomable. I don't know that I would want to survive without Esme. Bella's feelings on the subject of vampirism were well known among the family. All of us wanted her forever. Even Rosalie had grudgingly admitted, aside from Bella missing out on having children, even she had no qualms with the girl becoming one of us. But now, our family is barely functioning. Sure, we had been happy together without her for decades, but once Bella stepped into our lives, she permanently changed us all. Her capacity to love is truly astounding, and yet we walked away trying to appease Edward. We all believed he would change his mind shortly. Oh, how wrong we were. 2 weeks after we moved, Esme began painting a picture of the family to place in our bedroom. It was so detailed it could almost be a photograph, showing the entire family sprawled out in the backyard just days before Bella's 18th birthday, naming shapes they identified in the clouds. Esme had been the last to join us, and the view of the painting was from the deck, clearly representing what she saw as she paused to take in the scene. The few trees that were not evergreen provided bright splashes of red, orange and yellow in the background. Edward, Emmett and Jasper were all but piled on top of each other. They had been having quite the wrestling match when Bella asked if anyone else saw the cloud that looked like a vampire cola, complete with fangs. That question had caused the pillow and started the subsequent cloud gazing. Emmett had landed on the bottom, as usual, his fighting skills slightly below that of his brothers. Rosalie had situated herself close to his head when she realized he would be maintaining his prone position. Jasper's legs remained tangled with Edward's, for they hadn't deemed it necessary to stir themselves either from where they lay, one on each side of Emmett, their entangled ankles crossing his knees. Alice, Bella and I had moved from our position, a safe distance from the friendly scuffle, and joined them on the grass. I glanced toward the house and spotted Esme looking at us all with a wistful smile on her face. I know how happy seeing everyone together made her. I felt it as well. Our family was now complete, and I felt perhaps this was my reward for trying to live an alternate lifestyle compared to most vampires. Esme caught my eye and winked before joining in the fun. Only days later our family had been, perhaps irreparably, destroyed. That painting is Esme's last happy memory of the family altogether, and she spends time every day gazing at it, her eyes filled with tears that will never fall. Alice, who had always been our busy bee, zipping here and zipping there, has had her metaphorical batteries removed. She no longer finds joy maintaining the height of fashion, and when she's actually at home, is rarely found outside of her room, where she constantly replays her memories, trying to figure out where everything went so wrong. It seems Edward's choices towards the end of his and Bella's relationship were not premeditated. That's the only way he could avoid Alice seeing the future that followed. Equally devastated is poor Jasper. One moment of weakness on his part, although his reaction cannot truly count as weakness, put in motion the beginning of the end. I have tried many times, along with the rest of the family, to make him see that the burden he bears is not only his own, but all of ours. We were all more thirsty than we should have been while Bella was over. The combined desire of the entire family, not to mention Edward's barely manageable lust for Bella's blood, was more than anyone would be capable of fighting. To Jasper it makes no difference. He soaks in the hurt pouring off us all and uses it to amplify his own pain. His torment is severe, and none of us are able to help him. Emmett and Rosalie manage the best, I suppose, although best is a relative term. Emmett's sadness is soothed somewhat by Rosalie's late-coming acceptance of Bella. They talk about her quite often whenever Edward is away. I don't know if it is entirely healthy, but they seem to be making up faux memories, an alternate reality if you will, the way things would be if Bella was still with us, activities they would have done together, places they would have visited. Rosalie and Emmett also take time to imagine what she is really doing, wondering if she has a steady boyfriend, if she went to college. They build their pseudo-happiness around the assumption that she is happy. They force themselves to believe it so they don't lose themselves in their sorrow over the loss of a member of their family. It tears me apart to hear them, but I cannot bring myself to interrupt their personal brand of therapy. Edward. So many times in the past years I have wished we had refused his request, but I also believed, after a certain point, that it would be cruel to disturb whatever life Bella had built in our absence. But my son, my first companion, worries me. Before Bella, he was somewhat standoffish and prone to melancholy, no one would deny that, but now he is truly disturbed. He rarely cares about his appearance, only showering or changing his clothes if Esme asks him to, where he used to be remarkably fastidious about his appearance. He no longer wants to spend time with the family, preferring treetops or damp riverbanks. Even when sitting or laying otherwise still, his hands relentlessly fidget, unable to refrain from some type of movement, be it shaking, tapping, or circling the tip of his pointer finger with his thumb. Edward never plays music anymore and can often be heard whispering to himself. His words are mostly too low to make out, but my concern for his state of mind grew exponentially when one afternoon recently, I heard him murmur, "Of course, my love." I wondered, does he believe himself to have been talking to Bella? I called out to him, and when he looked at me I noticed his eyes were strangely dilated. He was not hungry. We had returned from a hunt only hours before, but something was not right. It has also been becoming increasingly difficult to engage him in conversation. He seems unable to maintain his concentration. Thinking of the improvements Esme plans to make on the house is the only reason I haven't betrayed my worry to him. It would do no good for Edward to know my suspicions. And poor Bella. We have obviously been deluding ourselves. Whatever has happened to her is most likely something that could have been prevented if we hadn't left her. Could she have forgiven us if we had gone back? Furthermore, what is it that has damaged her so? do I even have a right to ask? Aside from the scars visible, there is an obvious sadness about her. I hang my head considering how much of this sad business that would never have come to pass if only I had said no to my first son. Ooh. Caius Pav. Arrow did not try to converse on the way to Isabella's room, and for that I am grateful. I have no interest in speaking to anyone until I see for myself that Isabella is well. Marcus called for us to enter after I knocked lightly on the door. There he sits with Isabella still in his arms, but devoid of that horrible blank look from earlier. My tension has eased considerably upon seeing life in her eyes once more. Perhaps for a human her reaction was not so odd. After all, we vampires possess the ability to instantly assimilate new information, yet earlier we were all stunned, were we not? She shifted off of Marcus's legs, and they rearranged themselves so that they are now sitting side by side. "You're well?" I asked as soon as her eyes met mine. "I think I'm going to be," she signed, the slightest of smiles on her face. "I am pleased to hear of your improvement in spirits," I spoke earnestly. "She seems pleased to consider making the castle her permanent home," Marcus applied. "This information certainly pleases me immensely. Having Marcus approach her on the subject has removed the need for me to beg, in a most unbecoming fashion, for her to remain here. You're sure you would all like for me to live here?" I spoke her words aloud for my brother's benefit. Arrow swept to her side and gripped her chin lightly. "Well, of course we want to keep you, Tesoro," he said incredulously. "Why else would we have invited you here in the first place?" Once he released her, she slumped slightly before replying. "I thought you might just want to see how much information I may have been told or spread about vampires. I thought once I had told you all you wanted to know that you would have no more use for me." Her answer, though in some cases was quite possible, in this instance made my heart feel as though it were weighted with lead. "You thought we would kill you?" I asked, my voice harder than I had intended. She nodded. I kneeled in front of her, interrupting her stare at the floor. "I apologize for not speaking my intentions clearly from the beginning. It was always my hope to invite you to live here with us, be that your wish. Do not forget, Angel, that you saved me, and I intend to attempt to repay you. As it turns out," I continued, "it is an incredible coincidence that the Cullens are the vampires you know. We invited Carlyle, hoping there was something he could do to restore your voice. We did not mention it before for fear of giving you false hope." She looked to be pleasantly moved by the gesture before a sudden flash of alarm crossed her face. "Are they in trouble?" She seemed desperate to know the answer. "We have yet to discuss the matter." Arrow broke in, understanding the look of distress on her face, if not the language of her hands. "We wanted to check on you and retrieve Marcus before beginning." The wariness did not leave her features. "This is a serious situation, and we must be sure to look at it from all angles," Arrow told her solemnly. "Would you care to spend some time with Jane while we counsel? I know she would enjoy your company." With a small nod, Isabella accepted. She seemed to be resigning herself to waiting for the determination of the Cullens' fate. "Jane," Arrow called. "Do not leave Isabella's side until we have resolved the matter of the Cullen family," he directed when the small blonde appeared only moments after she was summoned. "Very well, brothers," Arrow's voice was nothing but a sigh. "Let us see to the business at hand." With a bow taking leave of Isabella, he made for the door. "Remember, child, all will be well," Marcus said significantly, giving her a small, reassuring smile before exiting as well. Approaching her myself once my brothers had exited, I asked, "Would you permit me an audience later today? I would like to speak with you about an important matter," and was heartened by her immediate reply in the affirmative. "Of course, gladly," she told me with a hint of rose staining her cheeks. Impulsively, I lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles with the lightest of pressure before hastily following in the wake of my brothers. "Ooh. Well," I asked irritably upon joining Arrow and Marcus, "when do we kill them all?" Arrow cut his eyes at me. "I'm afraid this matter will not be solved so simply." "Why ever not?" I demanded to know. They clearly broke the rules by not keeping the secret and further had no intention of rectifying the situation. "For one," Arrow continued on, as if I weren't just shouting at him after hundreds upon hundreds of years, "my moods no longer faze him. The majority of the family wanted to change her. Early on, 2 of the number even offered to kill her. In the end it was the son Edward who begged the family to leave and sever all connection with Isabella." "Edward is the one she was involved with," I growled out. "Ignorant fool, that one." "Perhaps we should hear the entire story, Arrow. With more information we may reach a decision in a more timely manner," Marcus intoned, his voice carefully neutral. "You're right, of course. Come, let us sit." Arrow motioned to a set of blood-red armchairs around a black carved table in his personal study, "and I will share with you what I gathered from Carlyle and Jasper." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his hands back and forth along its red upholstered arms, let out a large breath, then finally began. The whole of this mixed-up business began when Isabella, then but 17, a junior in high school, walked into biology class for the first time and Mr. Edward Cullen met il suo cantante. The singer. Marcus gasped as I growled yet again. At the very least this Edward Cullen should be disposed of. It is madness that he hasn't drained her already. What games does he play? Yes, Arrow remarked gravely. It appears only his staunch devotion to refrain from taking human lives was the only thing that saved her that day and in the weeks following. He later fell in love with her, or so he believes. Jasper's memories confirm that Edward does indeed feel love for the girl, however I am not positive it is a healthy one, even though the boy claims to be her mate. I scoffed, her mate indeed. He would have changed her, had that been the case. My thoughts exactly, Caius. I am almost of the mind that the boy may have formed an addiction. That his euphoria from being with her and his subsequent derangement, which I saw quite clearly in both sets of memories, could be a byproduct of being so close to this hypnotically tantalizing blood and denying his cravings over an extended period of time. I am afraid in his case drastic measures according to the Cullen ideology may be required to restore his mind to health. That still does not address the issue of Isabella being left behind possessing knowledge she should never have had access to. Marcus added, though he was rubbing his chin mulling over this new development in what we had believed to be a clear-cut case. No, it does not. Arrow conceded. However, the entire coven, excuse me family, is suffering deeply from her absence. In their hearts she was a member in every sense of the word. They have not been able to come to terms yet with the separation, nor have they forgiven Edward for forcing their decision. We're still waiting. I drawled sarcastically. No matter how upset they are over the matter, they all played a part in creating this mess, and so far I have seen no evidence that will save them. There is more. The situation alters yet again, brothers. Arrow's eyes gleamed. This should be good. Marcus and I both leaned forward anxious to hear more. Jasper and his maid Alice, who, by the way, sporadically has visions of the future, no. Do not interrupt me. We will come back to that another time. As I was saying, Jasper and Alice went back to Forks only 6 months after the entire family departed. Arrow drew out the last bit, enjoying having us waiting so intently for the information only he could provide, the egomaniac. The timing was such that Edward was on an extended hunt with Carlisle and would be gone for at least a week. None of the others knew of their plans. They went to change her. Ooh. Jane Pav. Are you okay? I asked my new friend softly. I was slightly relieved when she nodded and I could see her countenance seemed less troubled than earlier. I had seen the look on her face when she caught sight of the newcomers. There was obvious recognition, not to mention the pain. It almost makes me feel sympathy for those I've affected with my gift, almost. I sat down on the bed and took her right hand in my left. It was strange, feeling the weakness and warmth of her hand, but not unpleasant. She looked down at our hands, both so pale, but completely different in every other aspect. I was surprised when she leaned her head onto my shoulder. It is a sensation I am not accustomed to. I am positive the last time I physically comforted someone was before my change. As a vampire, I have been too feared to be sought out for companionship. Inspiring fear works for me, however. It keeps everyone far enough away that no one notices how alone I feel at times. If not for my brother and Arrow, my time here with the Volturi would be spent in almost perfect solitude. Then in comes Isabella, more vulnerable than any vampire, but she drew me in immediately. I'm not sure how she bypassed the frigid barrier I normally project. With her I was never an evil, dangerous monster to be feared, I was just a potential friend. Slowly, so as not to harm her by accident, I rested my head atop hers. My heart burned pleasantly when she squeezed my hand in response. We sat that way, quietly sharing the calming comfort of friendly companionship until she eventually took her hand back so that she could write to me. I read as she scratched out, in bold, capital letters, "What a morning." I laughed. That was certainly the truth. One question burned at the forefront of my mind. Is Carly's son the one you were involved with? His son, yes, she penned, but not the one here today. His name is Edward. He is the mind reader whose gift did not work on me. I nodded. She was still writing, so I didn't add anything, only waited for her to finish. How has everything gotten so strange all of a sudden, Jane? She wanted to know. I wasn't exactly sure what she was referring to. Her having been involved with a family of vampires, befriending shape-shifting wolves, and now living with us vampire royalty and law enforcers seemed strange enough already for a human. I had to ask her to clarify. Well, when I came here, it was under the assumption that once the kings got the information they wanted, I would be killed. My jaw dropped. Then why did you still come? I spluttered. You seemed content to be here. I could not stop my head from shaking back and forth in confusion as I tried to make sense of her revelation. First off, it's not like they couldn't have just forced me to come anyway, so why fight? But more than that, I've been on my own for quite a while, Jane, and after my experiences, it's been difficult to reacclimate to everyday life, knowing what I do about the supernatural beings in the world. Living with Emelina and Eliseo was a lifesaver, well it lasted, but I still couldn't tell them anything about my past. Haven't you ever heard of putting someone out of their misery? She asked, a dark expression that didn't suit her, showing on her face. With Caius in the cave, I thought at least if he took my life, I would be helping someone in some small way, you know, make it a more worthwhile passing. Morbid yes, I've just been so tired and alone. I honestly don't know what made me cut myself like that. It's not like he would have died without the blood. I suppose he looked so cut up on the outside that it reminded me of how torn apart I've felt on the inside these past years, and I just couldn't stand to leave him like that. I'd long ago given up on fixing me, so I fixed him instead. The words, striking against the bright white paper they were written on, bothered me tremendously. Unable to resist, I grabbed her and hugged her fiercely. Please don't feel that way, my distress almost causing my voice to falter. I'm so glad Caius brought you to us. Stay here. Surely the kings would allow you to stay. I can speak with Arrow. You won't have to be alone. I already consider you a friend. Please stay. She squeezed me back, harder than I thought her human form could manage, and I felt hot tears hit my shoulder before she pulled away and wiped the remaining moisture from her face. Thank you so much, Jane. She wrote. I'm so glad to have gained your friendship. Actually, that's part of this morning's story. The kings and I have just had a conversation about my future here. And? My question came out slightly shrill. I swear this girl provides the shortest answers possible sometimes, just to drive me insane. Basically, the kings told me they would love for me to stay indefinitely. My misty-eyed friend scribbled quickly for my benefit. I went from being all alone to being offered a family. I didn't think I'd ever have that again. Ooh, that's wonderful. I squealed uncharacteristically as I clapped my hands, while Isabella rolled her eyes at my antics with a tolerant smile on her face. Then, I asked as the thought occurred to me, you will become one of us, won't you? Ooh. Aropov. They went to change her. Well, what the hell happened then? I've never heard of a vampire with performance issues. Caius scoffed. Neither she nor her father were at home. I continued, not allowing his outburst to distract me. A very large, young and remarkably foul-smelling, native man was leaving the house as they arrived. They assumed him to be a friend of the family. When Jasper and Alice asked him what time the Swans would be home, he told them in somewhat profane language that they had a lot of nerve, sticking their noses into business that was not their own, especially when they had not bothered to communicate at all with Charlie, her father, or Bella for the last 6 months. The boy finally relented and told them that Charlie and Bella wouldn't be coming back. Alice pressed him, demanding to know how to find them. The young man grudgingly provided Charlie's new address. Jasper and Alice followed the lead right to the local cemetery. Her father is dead. What happened to him? Marcus wanted to know. Caius looked as if he had been about to ask the same question. They do not know. It took them days to run across the young man again. In the meantime, they had watched to high school, hoping to see some sign of Isabella, but she never came. When they finally found the native boy and questioned him again, he shrugged and told them he hadn't seen Bella since her old friend Victoria had caught up with her. Jasper's memory showed that he was aware of the young man hiding something, but sensed his statement was essentially truthful. Thus, they were heartbroken for the second time. They had lost her once because of their brother's foolishness and then lost her again to an unforeseen enemy. You see, it turns out Victoria is the mate of the nomad James, who bit Isabella before he was destroyed. I feel as if I have been dropped into one of those telenovelas that Heidi is always blathering about, Caius groaned, sweeping his long hair back with his hands. So, having no definitive evidence, no graves, no unidentified remains, our dear Alice and Jasper have spent the last 3 years searching for any trace of Isabella, knowing all the while that she is most likely dead. They have taken extended trips away from the family whenever possible and just recently come as far as Spain to see an acquaintance of Jasper's. This vampire is apparently connected to a substantial network of vampires but chooses to live an almost purely nomadic existence. Peter, Jasper's contact, had an interesting story to share with them. He told them that a human, quite similar to their Bella's description, had that very day significantly aided the volturi in some fashion and was in turn provided with medical care as compensation. Obviously someone here in the castle is friendly with this Peter. We will need to investigate the type of information that has been shared and with whom. Regardless, when Alice and Jasper heard of Carlisle's impending visit, Jasper asked to join him. A vision told Alice that by doing so, Jasper would find, if not Bella, information significant to their ongoing search. Why did this Alice not come as well? An excellent question, Brother Caius. Arrow acknowledged. Apparently, though she was not able to ascertain the identity of the mystery guest, she was able to see that things went more smoothly if she were absent from the proceedings. Caius merely snorted and rolled his eyes in response. So, brothers, we reach the present time, and although there is much more information I could share with you, I do believe I have shared the most relevant pieces required to decide the fate of the Cullens. I folded my hands and leaned back to await my brother's reactions. I say the law claims them. They had ample opportunity to change her. This of course came from Caius. It amazes me that he is so unforgiving, yet he himself is wrapped up in caring for the still very human girl the Cullens are facing punishment for. I believe the actions of Alice and Jasper should weigh heavily into the decision, Marcus stated. If the family is to be judged as a unit, then their actions could be seen as genuine effort to rectify the failings of the others in the coven. It's all excuses. Caius thundered. You sound as if you are trying to protect them. What have they done to earn your favor? Did you not feel what their presence caused this very morning? Marcus turned a calculating gaze upon his blonde brother. I do believe he has something up his sleeve. To destroy them will only hurt her further. Hurt her further? They have already hurt her tremendously, and as such I feel they have thoroughly earned whatever punishment we seem fit. My hot-headed brother proclaimed, now on his feet, shouting at Marcus. But, can you not see? Marcus questioned him gently. She loves them still. It can only be good for her if we are lenient, if we allow them to slowly reincorporate themselves in her life. There would be stumbling blocks to be sure, but she will never be as happy with that many holes in her heart as she could be if given a chance to mend them naturally. The Cullens obviously regret their actions. Shall we not give her a chance to heal the breach with these vampires, who mean so much to her? Oh, my devious brother, I can already tell, by the thoroughly put out expression on his sneering face, that Caius is trying to accept the merits of not killing the Cullens. His disappointment will be great, he does so love a good massacre, but I already know him to desire anything that will bring happiness to his not so secretly beloved Isabella. Do not think I have missed the smirk on your face, Arrow. Caius's glare was cold enough to freeze molten lava. They must be punished. If it is not to be death, so be it, but they must pay for their recklessness. Caius Pav. You fell victim to one of the classic blunders, the most famous of which is, never get involved in a land war in Asia, but only slightly less well known as this. Never go against a Sicilian when death is on the line. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha ha ha. Thunk. Jane's voice rings out into the room as she reads, with great gusto, to Isabella, whose body is shaking with silent laughter, a brilliant smile lighting her face. Jane held her composure only a half moment longer before giving voice to her own mirth. And what great work of literature has elicited such effusions? I questioned, approaching the young ladies. Witnessing such jollity has already gone a long way toward ridding me of my anger and disappointment with my brother's wishes to spare the Cullens. I do hope Isabella is accepting of the decision we have reached. If not, I can always appeal for reconsideration. A carefree smile lit Jane's face, the likes of which I have never seen, as she explained that the drivel they are reading is called The Princess Bride. If Isabella likes it so much, I suppose I could subject myself to it as well. I looked about the library as Jane took her leave. I have always thought it a magnificent room, dominated by massive bookshelves softened somewhat by the cream-colored carpeting and furnishings throughout the space. I was notified earlier by Dimitri that the girls have spent practically all afternoon here. During our short conversation, he brought up a matter that I feel will need to be discussed with my brothers. He says all the vampires of the guard he has spoken with today, as well as himself, have been feeling off. They all seem to be experiencing some small measure of longing, perhaps, to be around Isabella. I immediately inquired if they were drawn to her in a predatory sense, but Dimitri assured me that it was in no way connected to the desire to feed. He had trouble finding words to describe the sensation. Apparently, he was driven to be sure that Isabella was safe before the anxiety began to lessen. I don't know what to make of this development, and I'm not sure I like it. But first, I have a matter to discuss with the only human to ever capture my attention. I look to her now, sitting upon one of the few window seats throughout the room, watching the sunset over the great hills in the distance. The waning light is playing upon her hair, catching hues of the deepest red and gold, causing them to glisten in her rich brown hair. Her skin, though always lovely, is practically glowing in this dim light that separates brightest day from darkest night. As I sit down, near enough to converse intimately with her, I discover that I have forgotten everything I had planned to say. Her deep, gentle eyes are boring into mine, and I swear if she were to ask me for anything in this moment, I would move heaven and earth to grant her request. My shining angel, what have you done to me? I don't know what she saw on my face, but my silence clearly began to worry her. With questioning brows and gracefully moving hands, she drew me from my reverie. Has something bad happened? She questioned. No indeed, I choked out. I was merely lost in thought. I'm sorry to have worried you. Has a decision been made about the Cullens? She signed next. It has. In my opinion they are getting off far too easy, but my brothers wish to spare them. Indeed, I suppose it would be somewhat hypocritical to end them over a human that I quickly snapped my mouth shut. This girl scrambles my brain. Focus, Caius. They have not been formally sentenced yet, but Carlisle and Jasper have been notified that none of the lives of their family will be lost due to their actions. That is kind of you. Make no mistake, they will still face punishment. We cannot be perceived as weak by those who would seek to challenge our authority. I hope you can understand our reasoning. Yes, I do, she replied. But I can't help but feel that this is all my fault, that I brought this all on them. So many things are my fault. Bella, I spoke without thinking as I placed my hand on her soft, warm cheek. Lifting her downturned face gently, I caught her turmoil-ridden eyes. I don't know what number of burdens you carry on those petite shoulders of yours, but I can tell you, with no doubt in my mind, that you are in no way at fault for your association with the Cullens. Arrow saw very clearly the pull your blood has over Carlisle's youngest son. That boy would have followed you to the ends of the earth. I promise, Angel. You could not have stopped him from perusing you. I pulled her into my embrace as the first tears fell from her eyes, and it was the sweetest torture I have ever endured, heaven and hell all mixed up into one life-changing experience. Her hot tears burned my neck as they hit, before rolling downward and collecting in the fabric of my shirt, her sadness searing me in a way that physical injuries failed to emulate. The scent of her hair and skin is filling my senses and fogging my brain. I have never, in all my years, felt so strong and so incredibly weak all at the same time. My heart aches from her sadness, yet rejoices in her nearness. Deep in my being a satisfaction flares to life the likes of which I have never known. No hunt, no battle has ever engendered this feeling of accomplishment achieved by the mere act of holding this mortal woman's body close to mine in an attempt to comfort her. The realization is frankly quite terrifying. Minutes later, as her tears subsided, I plucked up my courage and began to speak, still holding her securely. I sought you out this evening, mio Angelo, I whispered into her hair, not to distress you, though that is what I have done. My purpose was to ask you, to inquire if. Yet again my words failed me. So much for an eloquent speech. Isabella, I want to be close to you, that is to say, I request permission to get to know you on a more personal level. I have already witnessed your bravery and selflessness firsthand. I could have killed you so easily in the cave. My wounds needed more blood than your body holds to fully heal, and with your previous knowledge of vampires, I'm sure you were well aware of that fact. Yet, you still made the sacrifice. I have also witnessed your caring nature. The vampires of your past are practically innocent kittens compared to the Volturi vampires, and yet here you have won the world's most feared, giggling like a schoolgirl. You show an acceptance of our baser nature that I was unaware a human could possess. I know you suffered under a misapprehension due to lack of explication earlier in your stay, so I would like to leave no room for error. I am interested in courting you, Isabella, if you will accept me as your suitor. It is true that we have known one another only a short time, but I am earnestly desirous of attempting to win your affections. When my bumbling ramble finally reached its conclusion, she leaned slightly away, but did not remove herself from my embrace. If my heart were capable of beating, I believe it would be racing as fast as Isabella's currently beats. She searched my face for incalculable moments, looking for what I know not. My chest clenched most painfully when her eyes trailed down to land upon my mouth. Only half a breath later she began to move, tortuously slow, closing the gap between us two. The puff of her moist breath caressed my lips just before they were pressed, fully and earnestly, by her own warm full lips. This perfect first kiss lasted only a moment, but my life as I know it is over. In this moment I am born anew, and I am made only for her. Ooh. And how is our dear one this evening, brother? Arrow asked with an inane smirk plastered across his all-knowing face. You know very well how she is. I have already made contact with your blasted thought-siphoning hand, have I not? You also know that I wish to discuss the information I received from Demetri about the affliction of our guard. I am most assuredly not willing to rehash the events of the library, the lovely walk Isabella and I shared when I escorted her back to her chambers, nor what I felt when she allowed me to kiss her once more, as I wished her good night. Demetri. Alec. Felix. Arrow called, his voice only minutely raised from the level at which we were conversing. Within moments the three appeared. Please share with Arrow what we spoke of earlier, Demetri. I requested. As he read Demetri, a speculative look began to form on Arrow's ancient face. And you, Alec? He shifted his attention to the next vampire and began to glean what information he could from this new source. Interesting, very interesting. You have had a similar experience as well, Felix? Arrow asked, turning to the last of the assembled guards. A brief touch later, and Arrow had observed the phenomenon from all three vampires' perspectives. That will be all, thank you. I dismissed them, eager to continue our discussion. What do you make of it, Arrow, Marcus? Have you ever heard of such an occurrence? I have indeed witnessed a similar spreading of communal emotion, though it was presented in the form of happiness. Arrow spoke warily. At his words my eyes snapped to Marcus, who had been sitting silently, staring into the flames dancing wildly in the fireplace. Yes indeed, he whispered. I have seen the similarity myself. I'm so sorry Marcus, I said, internally cringing. I wasn't thinking. I had other matters on my mind. If you wish, Arrow and I can speak of it another time. No. I am well, but thank you for your concern. It seems Isabella inspires devotion and protectiveness as involuntarily as Didim promoted happiness in those around her. If she is capable of so much as a human, just imagine what she will do as a vampire. Arrow speculated. You believe she will choose to be changed? I asked, my nerves on edge as I awaited his reply. Oh, Brother Caius, I forgot to tell you. Thanks to a short chat early this evening with dear Jane, I have what you might call the inside scoop to Miss Isabella's opinion of her own immortality. How could it ever have slipped my mind? Dramatic bastard. And what might that opinion be, brother? I ground out, trying desperately to keep my temper knowing full well he is only doing this to wind me up. Well, it seems her biggest hang-up is the fear of being alone, with no one around to love her as she wishes to be loved. The moment Arrow made his pronouncement, Marcus snorted. It is a sound I am positive I have never heard him emit in these multiple millennia we have been family. Something amuses you? I asked him, unable to keep a half smile off my face. Judging by the change I am currently witnessing within your very heart, I know Miss Isabella will seldom be alone again. I have no doubt she will also be the recipient of as much love and affection as she can handle. He responded, smirking slyly in my direction. Just who is this vampire, and what has he done with Marcus? Am I correct then, in assuming that she is my mate? I have never felt emotions of this magnitude. It was not even this intense until she kissed me. At this Marcus raised an eyebrow and cut a glance in Arrow's direction. Arrow winked at him and smirked knowingly at me. Infuriating individuals. Unbidden, a growl began rumbling in my chest. I have never been in such a position, so unsure and vulnerable. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Peace brother, Arrow spoke soothingly. I apologize. We are just so happy for you. I suspected the moment you deposited her in my arms to have her taken to the hospital. There must have been some level of awareness already deep within you. For intriguing or no, if you had not recognized her as your mate on some level, she would be but a corpse, rotting in that cave. Then it was apparently Marcus's turn to add his wisdom to the mix. Remember however Caius, we do not know to what extent or intensity her feelings may develop while she is human. The strength of the bond she can maintain is not in question, but her human brain and past experiences may be a hindrance. For us, one day or 1,000 matters little. Our temporal perception is quite different. She may need time for her mind to work through what she is most likely already feeling and adapt it to an acceptable pace for a human relationship. Do not rush her. If she becomes an immortal the point is moot. But until then, you will need to tread lightly. She has been deceived by one our kind into believing she was his mate and he left her. She may not believe in the permanence of the devotion you offer her for quite some time. I have waited many lifetimes for her. I responded, feeling much more calm than I had been only moments before. I am satisfied merely having her near. So, set your mind at ease. She will have as much time as she requires. Ooh. Jasper Pov. I love you too. See you soon. We will at least keep our lives then. Carl sighed after I ended my call to Alice. It looks that way. I told him. But they won't be letting us off scot-free either, I can guarantee you that. He looked to be contemplating the possibilities before changing the subject slightly. Does Alice see any issues with tying everything up within the 2-month time frame, the volturi said. I know he is concerned about leaving his fellow doctors in a bind, not to mention the fate of the family in general. Having spent so many years with Maria, I can think of quite a few ways they could punish us that would leave us begging for death, but I don't think the volturi's plans lean toward the sadistic. There is a sickly twist to the emotions of the truly evil, and despite rumors to the contrary, the volturi seem to be lacking that distinctive emotional mark. I'm positive Caius would be a force of nature in battle, wild and terrible, but even he does not strike me as the type to maim and torture for the mere pleasure of doing so. Alice says there should be no issues getting everyone here within the given time frame. Emmett and Rosalie will arrive first, they are leaving on a honeymoon after their elopement. Alice's visions show us finding a buyer for the house within approximately 6 weeks, and then she and Edward will join us. How's Edward? Well Carlisle, I won't lie to you. He hasn't spoken to anyone since he found out Bella is here with the volturi. We will need to keep a close eye on him. I'm not sure his elevator goes all the way to the top these days if it ever really did. He could be a danger to both Bella and himself. I gasped as a sudden crippling terror washed over me. Carlyle shouted, trying to understand the cause of my discomfort. I was unable to respond at the moment, but I immediately recognized the personal tenor of the emotion. Bella. Ooh. Caius Pav. Barrow, Marcus and I stood in a long glass corridor, windows forming the walls and ceiling, waiting to watch the sunrise over Volterra. We felt the symbolism was worth observing, the dawning of a new era for us all. We are adding to our number. Isabella had agreed to stay indefinitely. She is beloved already by us kings, esteemed and instinctively protected by the guard, and one day will most likely be the most powerful queen ever known to the vampire world. I personally await the day she is ready to start our future together. It could possibly be the newfound sentimentality getting to me, but I notice I am quickly developing a gnawing discomfort in my chest. I raise my hand, as if to rub away the sensation, an odd gesture for an immortal, and in doing so draw my brother's attention. What is it? They ask almost simultaneously, just before pain racked my body a cry for help, my mind supplies. Ella, I rasped before sprinting to her room, my brothers following closely behind. I burst through the doors to find her unnaturally pale and perspiring, limbs thrashing from unknown provocations. I was in the process of reaching out to her, wanting to wake her from her torment, when Cullen and his boy entered the room. My reaction to seeing that heavily scarred and dangerous vampire so close to my newly acknowledged and vulnerable mate was instantaneous. A low, threatening growl reverberated deep within me. I knew I could not let this vampire near her. She must be protected. Through my rage the faces in the room blurred away and all I could see were the bodies of my adversaries advancing. The scarred one spoke lowly to the others. We need to back away. Right. Now. But he could hurt her in this state. The other blonde countered. The two others were already moving away. No, trust me Carlyle. Everything will be fine if we give him space. The scarred one insisted. He and the whiny blonde backed slowly out of the room until the scarred one alone was visible in the corridor. He then began speaking to me. Caius, we only came to help. The dangerous vampire had taken a position sitting on the stone floor with his back leaning against the wall. I felt her fear Caius, and I know you want her to feel better too. Look at her. She needs you. There is no danger here, you are among your friends and family. An odd sensation that I should trust his words began worming its way into my consciousness. Rational thought began to reassert itself and I once more turned to Isabella. Ooh. Bella Pav. Blood. So much blood. It's dripping from the ceiling and seeping between the floorboards. The smell causes my stomach to instantly revolt, mixing its contents with a massive amount of fluid and pieces of flesh and organs littering the floor. No. I choked past another bout of nausea. No. Dad, I had never spared much thought for calling him anything other than Charlie, but seeing his mangled remains, littering the kitchen and part of the living room of our house, the only thoughts that came to mind are that I've lost my daddy, and I don't know if he knew how much I loved him or how much I appreciated his unobtrusive brand of support through my depression. I stayed there, mere feet from the bulk of his body, shaking violently on my hands and knees fighting desperately to maintain consciousness. The crumpled letter reads so many times it resembles tissue. It describes the tortures my mother and Phil endured before they drew their last breaths. Removed nails, broken bones, flayed skin and burning limbs were only a few things that bitch Victoria chose to do to them. She generously included pictures to help me get the full impact. More images, Colin and Brady's heads mounted on poles in the Blacks' backyard. Emily's eyes, frozen open in death, her hands clasped to her swollen belly in a fruitless attempt to protect her unborn child. That child, maliciously torn from her body and tossed carelessly onto Sam's front porch. Demon eyes, red with gratuitous death. A wreath of flaming hair fanning behind her as she gracefully leaps. Pain. So much pain when her hand connects. Isabella. Isabella. That voice, so familiar and soothing vibrating against my ear, plus a cool hand running soothingly up and down the length of my left arm, drew me away from the gore and pain and terror. I awoke to find myself completely enveloped in Caius's embrace. Tremors still racked my body, and tears ran unchecked. A distant voice asked, "May I help her?" "Angel," Caius spoke softly. "Jasper would like to ease your discomfort. Will you allow him to assist you?" I nodded my assent and reveled in the manufactured calm that flooded my being. Bella Pav. "That's right Angel, I have you. You are safe." Caius croons, his soft even voice helps to chase away the remnants of my dream demons. Breathing deeply, I forcefully push away the sight of lifeless eyes, rivers of red and gleaming, savagely bared teeth from my mind. "Are you alright?" My immortal security blanket inquires quietly, close enough that I feel his bottom lightly drag against the outer shell of my ear as his mouth forms the words. "Yes," I signed, feeling irritated by the sudden reappearance of the worst of my nightmares. But how did Caius know? I don't see him as the type to sit around and watch me sleep. "I'm sorry for disturbing you." I continued, not sure how to ask about his appearance without sounding ungrateful. You are not a disturbance, Isabella, but what was that? I felt your distress from the far side of the castle. As he spoke, he clutched a perfect pale hand to his still heart. Does it happen often? He pressed, insistently eager to know the source of my distress. My sleep-addled brain reeled, trying to understand how he could have possibly felt that I was upset. I suppose that will be a question for another time. I sigh heavily and pull myself into a sitting position, regretfully dislodging myself from his arms in the process. This nightmare is nothing more or less than the remainder of my history, which I have been working towards sharing with my new acquaintances, my new family, as it turns out. It's time to finish my story. I told Caius, who was eyeing me questioningly. Explaining my dream would, in essence, be telling you my past, so I suppose it would be better to go ahead and get the whole story out. I just can't do it lying down. I explained with a forced smile. Once again I realize how glad I am that he took it upon himself to learn sign language. I can't imagine trying to get the upcoming horror down on paper. While settling myself against a headboard, from the corner of my eye, I catch a flicker of movement by the door. Turning my head to fully face the open doorway, intense golden eyes shock my system for the second time in less than 24 hours. This time, however, I can still feel the warming blanket of calm they delivered. These golden eyes were not currently instigating my pain, but working to free me from it. In fact, I find that I'm ridiculously grateful for the emotional hijacking Jasper performed just minutes ago. Between Caius's presence and Jasper's gift, they quickly and efficiently broke the stranglehold of terror suffocating me. Thank you. I signed to the vampire in the hallway. She says Caius had just begun when Jasper broke in. I know. He said, a crooked smile pulling up one corner of his mouth. He lightly double-tapped his chest, and I understood. Jasper felt my thanks. The mattress shifted slightly as Caius stood, his bright blonde head cocked curiously to one side. He made his way to the door and peered out into the corridor, first to the left, then the right. He then returned to me, with bemusement painting his features, and I found I could not resist seeing for myself just what had caused this reaction. So great was the surprise awaiting my curious gaze that upon its discovery, goosebumps immediately flashed across my skin. They enveloped me completely, even raising the baby fine hairs at the base of my head as my eyes drank in the awesome sight of what I am almost positive is the entire Volturi guard. This multitude of vampires neither moved nor spoke as they stood lining the passageways in sentient marble. Burning curiosity arose in me. What could possibly have happened to call them all here to the corridor outside my room? They are all genuinely concerned for you, Bella. Jasper whispers from the position he holds, seated on the floor. I looked on amazedly at the legion of stoic figures garbed in hues of black and gray, trying desperately to keep my jaw properly hinged. Suffering as I am still from a hazy state of semi-consciousness, I am finding it extremely touching that they have assembled themselves here due to nothing more than my battle with a night terror, no matter how real it may be in my mind. It almost brings tears to my eyes, having such a level of caring right at my fingertips there for the taking. Not knowing any other measurable way to express my gratitude for such thoughtfulness at the moment, I motioned with both hands for the group to come inside before I turned to reclaim my previously vacated position on the bed. If these vampires are all to be part of my everyday life and new family, they deserve to be included. I watch in wonderment as the graceful figures of the guard file silently in. I note that their steps are nearly synchronized as I listen to the whispering of their dark robes that move minutely in response to each elegant stride. The pale figures soberly assume positions along the walls of my, thankfully enormous, bedroom. It is a surreal experience indeed. Their faces display no definable emotion, but I do not instinctually feel uncomfortable in their stately presence, like I did the last time. When all were settled, the guard minus Jane covered every inch of bare wall and in some areas stood too deep with the shorter standing in front. Caius, instead of choosing to sit with me on the bed, was standing directly on my left, clasping my hand firmly but gently in his cooler one. Barrow and Marcus, who I had not noticed at first, situated themselves in the two armchairs and instructed Carlyle and Jasper to take the small sofa, all of which had been oriented to facing the bed instead of the fireplace. Jane, with deep concern in her eyes, hopped up beside me and settled herself on my right. 34 vampires now filled the space, all variations of red and burgundy eyes, plus 2 sets of gold, locked solely on me. I turned to Caius, who seemed to know the answer before I asked the question. I am at your service, milady, he assured me, bowing his head. Well, since you are all here, I began, Caius' voice delivering my poor attempt at humor to the others. I waited for the light smattering of canned laughter to die out before continuing on. I want to thank you all first for your concern. It means so much to me. I was relieved to be using non-verbal communication as I felt my throat constrict with long suppressed emotions that you have accepted me so quickly. I came here only 2 days ago, human and completely unknown to you, yet in this short time you have deemed me worthy of your notice. My nightmare tonight was fueled by memories, true horrors that plague me when I close my eyes. Before I can explain them I need to travel back to the events that set all the others in motion. Since news and gossip travel like wildfire, I'm sure you are all aware that at one time I was involved with a vampire, Edward Cullen. During our fairly short but intense time together, I was targeted by a tracker who savored the challenge of trying to steal me from a large, highly gifted coven of vampires. Before this vampire, James, was killed bit me. I held up my wrist to show the silver-white double crescent scar to my audience. Most appeared either shocked or incredulous, some hissed at the sight, and a few looked on me with what I interpreted as admiration. I have a feeling I'm the only human in existence to bear the mark of an immortal. Lucky me. When Edward refused to let me change and suck the already burning venom from my system, I began to realize that his love for me was perhaps not as absolute as he liked to declare. Our relationship, from that point on, was particularly strained. I insisted he should have let the venom spread. He repeatedly refused to consider the idea of me attaining immortality, though I could see no other way for us to truly be together. At my 18th birthday party, which was held solely for the entertainment of Edward and Alice, I cut my finger opening an envelope. Overloaded empath Jasper was inspired by his whole family's spontaneous and overwhelming bloodlust to try and take a nip at me. My eyes followed the sound of a hastily drawn breath to find Jasper with his jaw slack and eyes wide. "I told you," she understood. Carlyle whispered knowingly to the shell-shocked blonde beside him. Edward overreacted, to put it mildly. I continued, not wanting to get sidetracked into a commentary on my feelings for any of the Cullens. "I'm not ready to even contemplate turning over that stone just now." He shoved me back, right into a table full of glassware. So, after the rest of the family ran out to escape the smell of flowing blood, Carlyle, instead of merely staunching the flow of blood from a small cut, was forced to spend the rest of the evening removing the glass shards and suturing half my arm closed. Less than a week later, after ignoring me and my many attempts to draw him out of the odd mood he was determined to wallow in, Edward hauled me out into the middle of a stretch of woods behind my house. He huffed around for a few moments until my curiosity and irritation grew too strong to ignore. I demanded he tell me what was going on, why he had been so distant. When he finally began speaking it was to tell me that I wasn't good for him and that he was tired of pretending we were compatible. He furthered my growing anguish by telling me that all the family were already gone so that we could have a clean break with no outside interference. He said it would be as if he never existed, that my human mind was a sieve and would allow my memories of our love to be quickly forgotten and replaced. Selfish prick, he never knew me at all if he couldn't recognize that my love for him, as well as his family, was genuine and would most definitely leave a permanent mark on my heart. He ran from me when I tried to argue and state my own point of view. Stupidly trying to pursue him, I got lost. Devastated and confused, I wandered for hours calling his name. I begged until my throat was raw for him to please come back. At some point I fell over a root hidden by fallen leaves and an ever-increasing darkness. I couldn't find the energy or the desire to get back up. I was soaked from the cold rain and largely unaware when one of the Quileutes, a member of the local Indian tribe, found me and carried me home. I saw nothing more of the Cullens until yesterday. It took 2 months of me skipping meals and hardly leaving my room for my dad. I stopped abruptly and covered my face with my hands as a wrenching, yet silent sob broke free. I am physically unable to cry out, but my body and my heart are demanding it. I need to scream, need to release this damnable pressure. Once more I felt Jasper's unnatural calm as it blanketed and dulled my out-of-control emotions. The boiling rage and sorrow slowly degraded and I was able to regain my composure. My dad, Charlie, decided he'd watched me hurt myself for long enough. He parked a wooden kitchen chair within 2 feet of me in whichever room I chose to mope. Excluding the bathroom, thankfully. He used that chair for days and stared me down until I broke. Aside from the supernatural elements, I told him everything. I told him how swept up I'd become in Edward with his perfect manners and near-obsessive attention. I told him how loved and cared for I'd felt, not just from Edward, but the entire family, and how foolish I felt having believed them, only to be proven woefully wrong. I poured out my pain and disappointment over the whole situation, from Edward callously dumping me in the woods to his family dropping me like a bad habit, going so far as to change cell numbers and email addresses to avoid contact with me. My mind turned back the clock and suddenly I was there in the living room on the couch with that damn wooden chair blocking my view of late-night television. I remembered the green threadbare thermal shirt I wore, the sound of my quavering voice, and the look on my dad's face, concerned but not censuring the night I gave in and accepted his help. He looked at me seriously, not like he thought I was just some silly lovesick little girl. He rubbed a hand across his stubbled chin and said, "You know, Bells, I think they're losing the most here." Completely confused, I grunted out a short, huh. He barked out a laugh before leaning forward to look me square in the face. Bells, I've watched you grow and learn and change your whole life. I may not talk as much as other folks, but that doesn't mean I don't know you inside and out. I've seen you stumble and fall, bend and break, but you've always dragged yourself and got on with the show. I can recognize, from a mile away, the gleam in your eye when you're looking for the answer to some new mystery, and I've watched you chomp down like a bulldog on a bone till you've found what you're looking for. Now, I've seen my baby fall in love for the first time and face her first big life disappointment. But honey, remember who you are. You are a strong, intelligent, tenacious young woman, no doubt about that, and they are missing out on the opportunity to have you bless and enrich their lives. They might be gone, but I've known and loved you from your very first breath, he said, and I'll love you after I draw my last. So you've hit a stumbling block. He said dismissively while waving his right hand nonchalantly in the air. I'm here to help you back up. Just let me in, sweetie, and we'll work through this together. With a juicy sniff, I focused on the present. I felt a slight displacement of air to my right, and by the time my head had fully turned, Jane was blurring into a graceful stop, offering me a tissue. Accepting it gratefully, I quickly put my face back in order. I found out, so late, how wonderful my father was. I'd spent so much time viewing him with a child's eyes that I almost missed seeing the real and surprisingly deep layers inside. I leaned on him and began healing. I also started spending time with my lifelong friend Jake again. He provided his own special brand of therapy. Jacob Black, I fully believe, is a walking, talking, earthbound manifestation of the sun. He is so happy and warm and bright. He always helped me find the brighter side of things. Once more my memories pulled me back in time to the night my best friend's life changed forever. The night he found out the ghost stories are true. About a month after my father-daughter breakthrough, Jacob sneaked to my house in the middle of the night. Dad was working, so waking him wasn't an issue, but I was puzzled as to why Jacob had come. He hadn't been feeling well at all, and I knew his dad had ordered him to stay home. I also knew Jacob was going stir crazy, he had said so only hours before. The moment I saw him, standing on my dimly lit front porch, it was obvious something was terribly wrong. I ushered him up to my room and pushed him to sit on the bed. His skin felt like a furnace, and his body was sporadically racked with trembling spasms. He'd been told by his dad to just wait it out, that others in the tribe had caught the same flu cold whatever it was, and that medicine wouldn't help. Jacob, even though he looked as though he could pass out from exhaustion, rose from the mattress and began restlessly pacing the floor of my tiny room. What is that smell? He burst out suddenly, his normally soft voice sounding eerily close to a growl. What are you talking about, Jake? Everything is the same as it always is. I insisted. I was beginning to wonder if his fever was making him delusional. No, something is very different. Your whole room smells off. It's burning the shit out of my nose. Ugh, this hurts. He hissed as his body bent double. I rushed to try and comfort him. Get away. He snapped before my hand even made contact with his shoulder. I feel like I'm coming apart. His words came out in a pained gasp. A great shudder rippled through his frame and he leaned out of the open window, sucking in deep lungfuls of cool night air. Jacob, what can I do? I asked helplessly. Let me take you to the hospital. He opened his mouth to answer, but at that same moment, I swear I saw the physical lines of his body begin to blur. Overcome by a jolting spasm, he lost his balance and fell from the window. Gasping, I ran to see if my best friend had survived the fall. Dreading what I would find, I peered down and saw, not Jacob, but a wolf of monstrous eyes standing right where I knew Jacob should have landed. What the? I whispered, causing the beast's head to snap up, and in that moment I knew. These weren't the eyes of an animal. They were the eyes of the boy I had known since we were toddlers making mud pies. These were the terrified, near-panicked eyes of Jacob Black. Jacob, I whispered to the gargantuan wolf whining in agitation on my lawn, can you understand me? He studied me for a moment before nodding his head. Looks like the legends were for real, huh? He huffed and turned his head away. I don't think he liked my little joke. I hurriedly made my way outside and rounded the house. He appeared larger still from this vantage point, but I knew that inside that wolf was my friend and he needs me. Inching closer, I finally got near enough that I could touch his trembling frame. He jolted the moment my hand made contact with his shoulder. SHHH, it's okay, Jake. You're going to be alright. This time he didn't move away. I rubbed his neck and shoulders and slowly his tremors faded. After another minute he shifted so that I could easily reach his head and ears, which I dutifully scratched. My eyes watched as his abdomen stretched to accommodate a giant sigh. Calm must have been the key, for as soon as he fully let go of his panic, I was assaulted with the image of an abnormally large and very naked Jacob Black. I had never been so thankful for poor night vision in my life. Rather than a prized tomato, I hastily told Jacob the first would grab a pair of Charlie's baggy sweats for him and darted back into the house. Jacob pulled on the grey sweatpants I tossed his way and I averted my eyes until he told me he was decent. At that moment a twig snapped in the distance. We both whirled around to see Embry Call come walking out of the woods in nothing but a pair of black cut-off shorts. He, like Jake, was barely recognizable. His face looked older, harder, and his body was no longer that of a gangly teen, but the physique of a fully matured, well-muscled man. "So, welcome to Sam's gang," he said to Jacob warily. "What?" Jacob choked out. Sam was the first wolf to change, then Jared and Paul. I was the newest until, well, you know. "But why?" Jacob whispered, still struggling to make truth out of legend. "Vampires." As the word left his mouth, Embry shot me an apologetic glance, though there was nothing that would have kept Jacob from the truth once he remembered the other half of the legend pertaining to spirit warriors, wolves, and cold ones. I could see the wheels turning in my friend's eyes, who had also looked to me when Embry did, and I saw the awful moment when the pieces of the puzzle lurched into place. His eyes returned to my window, the very one he had fallen through not 10 minutes before, then to the tree whose branches had a habit of scraping eerily against my window during a storm. With a great leap, he jumped high enough to grab hold of one of the lower branches, hauling his body gracefully behind in a way I'm sure he couldn't have managed before tonight. Lining his body up with the window, he swung, sliding effortlessly through the narrow passage into my room. This entire feat of acrobatic prowess was accomplished almost faster than I could blink, and I turned and dashed back into house to see what had him so possessed. I peered into my room and found Jacob sniffing along the floor, stopping suddenly at a spot that always creaked if it was stepped on. He pried back the floorboard and reached inside, pulling out a small cardboard box. "This is what reeks so much," he spat. Not wanting to see, but unable to tear my eyes away, I watched as Jacob tossed the lid aside to reveal a CD, Bella's Lullaby by Edward Cullen, clearly visible through the blue jewel case. An envelope that I knew without opening it contained 2 plane tickets, and finally the pictures of me, Edward and the Cullens, that had been stolen from my scrapbook. My heartbeat echoed furiously in my ears, the pressure in my head making it hard to think clearly. "Charlie and I have been killing ourselves trying to make you happy, get you past him, and you are hoarding this shit to keep him close to you. What the hell, Bella?" He stood quickly, tossing the box's contents carelessly as he stalked over to my position, still frozen in the doorway. With his newly acquired height he towered over me, his building rage seeming to inflate his overlarge new body even further. True, my progress has been slow, but my effort to put Edward Cullen behind me is sincere. Seeing his perfect face, staring back at me from the now half-crumpled picture on the floor, flooded me with emotion. I do still miss him as well as his family. "You don't care about anyone but yourself, do you?" Jacob spoke coldly. "You screamed in your sleep for weeks, and Charlie had to listen on helpless, while you tore yourself apart for someone who doesn't want you anymore. Were you lying to him, to us? You said you were letting him go, but it sure doesn't look like it, does it now, Bella?" I shook my head, intending to disagree, but before I could respond he was raging once more. "You'd throw us away in a heartbeat for that leech," his teeth gleamed menacingly as he ground out the word, "wouldn't you?" I lifted my watery eyes to see that Jacob was shaking violently all over, and in that moment the strain was too much for me. Having him, one of my only supporters through this mess, doubt me and knowing that the end result would be disastrous if he were to lose his human form this close to me, but unable to comprehend how to go about soothing him, I snapped. "I didn't know it was there." I screamed furiously, immediately feeling the painful repercussions that followed in the wake of strained vocal cords. "I didn't know, we didn't know, we didn't know," I repeated, quieter and quieter, sinking to my knees with my head bowed until my voice was barely a whisper. "But you did know they were vampires," he growled back. "You used me to get the information you were looking for." "Back up, Jake." Embry's voice demanded suddenly from behind my back in the hallway. Surprisingly, Jacob's feet shuffled out of view. I felt a wave of warmth surround me as Embry knelt and placed his hand on my back. He waited until I had calmed myself before taking my elbow and helping me up. I looked once more to Jacob, who had sat down on my bed with his head in his hands, his inky black hair spilling haphazardly over his bare shoulders. I realized how hard this all must be for him at the moment. His whole life has been turned upside down. He's been there for me, and I'm determined to be there for him. I walked over slowly, not wanting to surprise him, and ran my hand slowly from the crown of his head to the base of his neck, which I squeezed gently in a comforting manner. With the fingers of my other hand I combed absently through some of the glossy black curtain that was hiding his face from me. After a few moments he dropped his hands and raised his head. His troubled eyes only looked at me long enough to utter the words, "Oh Bella," before throwing his massive, scorching arms around my waist, burying his face in my abdomen and sobbing. We reached uncharted territory when he shifted into a wolf before my eyes one night. I signed for the benefit of my audience. Caius only made it to the word wolf before he abandoned his translation to snap at me. Your friend is a werewolf. I heard the inflection in his voice teetering precariously between anger and concern. Ah, brother, Arrow interjected, earning a glare from his agitated co-ruler. I wonder if I might respond to your inquiry in Isabella's stead. I don't care who answers me, Caius ground out, near murderously, so long as I find out how she came to associate so closely with a werewolf as to be in the immediate vicinity while he undergoes the change. She could have been infected or killed. Peace, dear brother, I do believe she was perfectly safe. Arrow offered cajolingly, although his manner did not appear to penetrate Caius's angry haze. And just how did you reach that conclusion, oh all-knowing Arrow? The strikingly blonde vampire snapped back. Carlisle Cullen. Arrow continued on, unruffled by the venom in his brother's tone. He has been familiar with these creatures for 3/4 of a century. I have all the information we require on this species, but have not had time to adequately address the subject with you as of yet. Will my opinion on the subject suffice now, brother? Arrow finished somewhat testily. If he was waiting for an answer, it sure didn't look like he would be getting one anytime soon. Caius continued glaring, but made no further outbursts. Very well, Arrow sighed theatrically. The highly abridged version is that select members of the Quileute nation are able to shift forms. This phenomenon only occurs if they possess the correct genetic makeup, never as a result of infection. Shifting is performed at will, though sometimes spontaneously as well, if they happen to be suffering from great tension or anger. Transformations are also not affected by the moon in any capacity. It appears their sole purpose is to protect the people of their tribe. Carlisle, after vowing that he and his family had no intention of hunting people on their lands, reached a peaceful agreement pertaining to the Cullens' habitation of the neighboring land. All throughout Arrow's explanation Caius remained rigid and silent, so I tentatively slipped my hand into his and gave it a small squeeze. His hard red eyes fell to me and studied my face for a moment before they dropped lower, to the marks on my throat. Did your wolf do this? He asked darkly, dropping my hand to trace a finger along the uppermost line of scarring. Keeping my eyes locked with his, I shook my head and mouthed, no. He immediately visibly deflated, right before my eyes. He leaned forward causing his white blonde hair to form a curtain around my face as he rested his cool forehead on mine. He took a deep breath in and slowly released it. He repeated this process 2 more times before straightening, nuzzling the tip of my nose softly with his as he stood. You did not deserve my anger. I am sorry for losing my temper. He spoke earnestly, though I completely understand the reason behind his upset. I'd seen firsthand what a werewolf can do to an immortal, even one with centuries of experience in battle. To demonstrate my forgiveness I grasped his hand once more and placed a light kiss upon its back. When I met his eyes again I noticed that they held the spark of very different emotion. Across the room Jasper cleared his throat loudly. Knowing this was not the time or place to address the interesting shift taking place between myself and Caius, I moved back to my interactions with the Quileute wolves. We covered a lot of territory in the days following, the Cullens, the reality of my accident in Phoenix, the inner workings of the wolf pack which I would not have been privy to if one hadn't transformed as he fell from my bedroom window, and the fact that I was the ex-girlfriend of a vampire. Jake and I cleared the air between us, and I was stronger than ever. The next few weeks were pretty quiet. Aside from Lee and Seth joining the pack, not much happened. Well, we did have a scare when their father had a cardiac episode and had to spend a few days in the hospital. I suppose seeing your son and daughter change into horse-sized wolves in the middle of the living room is not for the faint of heart. My left Caius snorted, okay I guess that was an extreme understatement. He recovered in time for Christmas though. They invited me and Charlie, along with the rest of the wolves to a gigantic Christmas feast. The flash of dark, sticky blood crossed my mind's eye, causing me to drop my hands and grip my thighs in an attempt to fight back the oncoming tremors. I had never spoken with anyone about what happened next. The wolves knew, but only because they share a pack mind. Noticing my sudden increase in tension, Caius seated himself beside me and wound his right arm around my waist. We are all here for you. Let us share your pain. He entreated. Jane as well reached over to give my knee a supportive squeeze. We decided to reciprocate the invitation for New Year's Day. I continued, steeling my nerves. We spent the entire morning cooking, knowing that the pack could easily eat us out of house and home. When it came time to start on the desserts, I couldn't find the bag of apples I'd picked up from the store a few days before. Charlie has asked that I make his favorite apple coffee cake with crumble topping and brown sugar glaze. From the first time I'd made it for him, he'd been hooked. Confused about the wayward apples, I asked my dad if he had moved them. When he told me he hadn't, instead of wasting time hunting them down, I ran out to the store to replace them. I never saw him alive again. I signed as great hiccuping sobs disrupted my already labored breathing. Even with Jasper's help my heart feels like it is bleeding out my anguish. When I hopped out of the truck at home with my replacements, there was a single red apple sitting just to the right of the bottom porch step. Its vibrant color caught my eye, situated as it was against the stark white snow that had been brushed to the side when we cleared the walk that morning. Shrugging, I continued into the house to escape the cold, blustering wind. After kicking the door closed behind me, I called out to my dad to let him know I was home. He didn't say anything, so I made my way to the kitchen, ready to scold him if he was sneaking food. I will never forget the sight that met me. When I have nightmares, they most always showcase the scene for me over and over again. He was mutilated. I signed with shaking hands. There were whole pieces of him missing, torn away and flung about the room, and so much blood that I was overcome. I hit my hands and knees and violently lost my breakfast. The floor, walls and ceiling were all covered in him. I kept trying to tell myself that this had to be a nightmare, but the smell said otherwise. When I finally tore my eyes away from my dad, I looked back to the door, thinking of the red apple outside, and I saw a message. Written in my father's blood on the back of the door were the words. Happy New Year, love Victoria. As I shook there on the floor, unable to remove my hands from its now sticky surface, I heard thundering steps ascend the porch stairs. My only comfort was that if it had been Victoria, I would never have heard her coming. Half a second later Jacob burst through the door, took one look at me and heaved a sigh of relief, though he had tears forming in his eyes. He picked me up, blood, vomit, snot, tears and all, and held me to his chest as he made his way back outside into the cold. He placed me in the passenger seat of my truck and cranked it to get the heat blowing before walking back into the house for about a minute, maybe two. When he returned he told me he'd called the police and that he would be here with me the whole time. It was then I noticed that he'd grabbed some of Charlie's clothes. They were the largest available and though they didn't fit him perfectly, they would stand out far less than wearing nothing but shorts in the middle of winter. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Members of the pack came and went, as did police and the coroner. All the while I sat there in my truck, staring at that happy red apple, knowing that somewhere close by Victoria was just as cheerful, reveling in my pain. I moved to the reservation that night. I couldn't bring myself to go back into the house. Though most of the pack weren't thrilled, they appreciated not having to branch their patrols far enough out to encompass my house, like they would have been if I had stayed there. The following morning, Sam and I went over who Victoria was and why she would purposely seek me out this way. I told him that Jasper insisted that she was the mate of the vampire that bit me, but Edward had sworn her thoughts betrayed nothing to prove Jasper's conclusion. 2 days later I received a package. It was a large cardboard envelope. Inside I found a letter and a dozen 8x10 photographs of my mother and Phil. Victoria had tortured them extensively and listed each method in her letter. The photos represented her favorite parts of the process. I hung my head, allowing my guilt to smother me. Caius had insisted, just the past evening, that nothing would have stopped Edward from approaching me. Given the events set in motion due to my association with the Cullens however, I know many wish she had drained me that first day. My mom and Phil were not Victoria's last victims. Bella, surely you know that if anyone is to blame it's me. Jasper's voice began from across the room. I should have said more, done more to make the family understand about Victoria, though I never thought if she came for retribution that she would take it out on you. I'm so sorry. I know there's nothing I can do to make things right, but I won't stop trying to make up for my past actions, all of them. There were many choices, from the beginning to the end, any of us could have made that would each have altered the resulting path. There is no going back. What's done is done. I signed back with somewhat abrupt gestures, my nerves too raw to acknowledge or refute his perceived culpability. After relaying my message, Caius icily added his own. While I appreciate your concern and assistance this evening, you will kindly not interrupt again. This is obviously difficult enough for her without making her feel sorry for you on top of everything else she is experiencing at the moment, Mr. Whitlock, I'm sure you understand. While I knew Jasper only said what he did to try to make me feel better, I desperately wanted to get all of this over, so I pushed on. Her next victims were practically children. Since she couldn't get me unprotected, she started snagging easy, yet memorable targets. Colin and Brady had only been wolves for days when we woke up one morning to find their heads mounted on stakes in Jacob's backyard. The wolves, outraged and looking to me with accusation in their eyes, were at a loss as to how she could make it through their defenses so easily. She seemed to have a gift that aided her in evading detection. Next she killed the alpha's maid and unborn baby. I shared, unwilling to supply further details. Many of the wolves never spoke to me again after they lost Emily, the alpha's fiancée, who had been expecting their first baby. She had left the reservation only long enough to drive to Forks for items that couldn't be found locally, a trip she made only once a month, but this time she never made it home. Her car was found on the side of the road, wrapped around a tree. It appeared as though her body had been ejected and thrown into the river below, but the wolves knew different. They picked up her scent and were in the process of tracking it back in the direction of the reservation, but I found her first. Not knowing of the frantic search being conducted, I decided to take a short walk. The path was well worn and in plain view of many houses. It was also in close proximity to the patrol lines that the wolves covered, so I always felt safe enough getting out to stretch my legs for a few minutes at a time. I had almost reached the Clearwaters, my turning point, when I saw her. Her face was a frozen, macabre mask of horror, her ruined throat crusted with drying blood. If not for the tiny trail of vibrant scarlet drops leading to her position behind a large bush, I would never have known she was there. Moments later 3 wolves exploded from the forest. Sam, Jacob and Paul shifted quickly upon reaching the scene. An inhuman howl, torn straight from his broken heart, loosed itself from the depths of Sam's chest. One need not be a wolf to hear the sorrow in his tone. Sam's despair was articulated and telegraphed clearly to the entire reservation. He knelt beside her and gingerly eased a few wayward tendrils of hair from her face. Heaving sobs tore from his giant frame, but he continued his attentions to the center of his now crushed and desolate universe. He stroked the scars of her face, the ones he himself had inflicted, while his wolf was young and volatile. His fingers swept down the column of her throat, bypassing the ragged flesh torn during her fatal attack. His sobs transitioned into apologetic murmurs. "I'm so sorry, Emily," he said. "I've failed you in so many ways," and now his deep voice faltered as he choked on his grief. "Now I've lost everything good I ever had in my life." Continuing its journey down the body of the woman, who could now never return the loving gesture, his large brown hand rested momentarily on her silent heart. "I swear to you now, I will not stop, will never rest until I have seen your murderer burned. I promise you, Emily, I promise." Moving one final time, his hand found a position between the two of hers. Feeling the loose skin Emily had been trying to protect, which had only half an hour earlier been firm and round full of their child, finally broke the alpha. He leaned over her body, placing his head on the abandoned womb, and gave in to his sorrow. Turning away from the heartbreak in front of him, internally fighting against the pain of his own loss, Paul's hard eyes found mine. The lonely wolf, the troubled young man who trusted no one save Emily, was practically pushing his words of blame straight into my brain. I didn't need to hear. I could see plainly the hate and pain my presence has caused to be born within him. Tremors broke out along his arms, their strength of which caused ripples to dance across Paul's substantial chest. It wasn't until a low, menacing growl became audible that Jacob turned, from the sight of Sam mourning so desolately, to jump and collide with Paul's body, as Paul phased in midair. I could feel the heat of the wolf's breath brush my face, he had gotten so close. With a giant shove, one no other in the pack could have accomplished, Jacob threw Paul back. The grey wolf rose, undaunted from his course, until Jacob's voice, ringing with an authority he had never before vocalized, commanded him to stop. Paul never stopped growling, though his body was pinned mercilessly to the ground, confined by the weight of an order from his new alpha. Jacob looked to me then, his eyes carrying a new depth of sadness and strain, and simply said, "Come." With that he walked away, stopping to place his hand on Sam's back and whisper in the broken man's ear. Shaking his head in response, Sam reached out and gathered his love into his arms, and we made our way into the forest, leaving Paul behind. I dared not break the silence to ask where we were going. Minutes later we emerged again, approaching the site of Sam and Emily's house. Sam suddenly dropped to his knees, though he kept a tight hold on Emily and began screaming "No." His head was thrown back, tendons and blood vessels straining from both the volume and the pressure. Heart beating madly, I looked toward the house. Laying upon the front porch was a tiny lump of red. Horrified anew by what I was seeing, I gave up the fight to stay strong and sank down on the wet grass, letting the tears come. These lives, this family, were all targeted because of me. Through my glassy eyes, I saw Jacob return to Sam after retrieving the callously discarded baby and kneel in front of him. More quiet words were exchanged between the two as Jacob reached out his free arm to envelop the broken family. The two wolves held each other, the lifeless pressed reverently between them, and shared their sorrow. One by one, gliding like avenging spirits from the trees, the pack arrived in response to their packmates' distress. Each joined the group with no words spoken, slowly forming a circle around their old and new alpha. I stayed where I belonged, on the outside looking in. I threw my arms around Caius, desperately needing physical comfort, as the memory of my sorrow and guilt hit me like it was only yesterday. I couldn't communicate to him just how much seeing Sam holding Emily and the baby had hurt me. I had experienced mourning for my own family, my parents, but seeing what the pain of losing a life partner and child had done to Sam, to the pack, haunts me still. Caius held me securely and questioned tentatively, "Do you need to stop? You need not continue right now if you need to rest." Not wanting to drag out the pain any longer than necessary, I shook my head no. I want to have this done. A few days after Emily and the baby's funeral, the wolves picked up the scent of a new vampire. This one was not as careful as Victoria, and they were able to follow him. I looked to Jane though my hands remained in Caius's view. They saw the volturi destroy a group of vampires that had been hiding out in a secluded house on the outskirts of Seattle. The wolves had gotten close enough to hear the vampire they tracked, Riley, yelling at the group he referred to as newborns, telling them their time had come. In 2 days they would destroy the wolves that had thwarted their mistress. The pack members present, who were returning home to report, were only just within hearing range when the screaming began. They crept close enough to see 4 black-cloaked figures completely destroy the group. Not knowing what to make of this development, they returned to share the information. I was able to tell them that what they had most likely seen was the volturi. I explained your function in the vampire world, and coupling that with the discovery of the newborns and the massive missing persons cases in Seattle, we were able to put all the pieces together. Victoria had kept us so busy with our personal losses that we never thought to associate the rapidly expanding pack and local crime rates with large numbers of new local vampires. At this point everyone was ready to celebrate. The pack all wanted to believe that Victoria had been preset in the house when the volturi arrived because they found no further sign of her on their patrols. I made the decision to leave the reservation, move on with my life, and I asked Jacob to take a walk with me so we could iron out the details. We were sitting on top of our favorite cliff, made so popular by the locals' obsession with cliff diving, when we heard the growling and angry yips of wolves in the forest nearby. Jacob stood and was just about to phase when a blur of white and flaming red struck him violently in the side. I heard the sickening crunch as many of his bones cracked from the force of her assault. I watched helplessly as his large form carved a small crater as it was ground into the soft, damp soil. Even though I had known it was a possibility, I was still struck dumb by the sight before me. Standing gracefully from her tackle was none other than a triumphantly grinning Victoria. Before I could track her movement, her pale form flashed forward and the back of her rigid right hand connected with my cheek. My head snapped sharply to the left as white-hot pain exploded in my head and neck. I stumbled back and met the rough, cutting bark of a tree. Instantly, Victoria was directly before me again. She grabbed a handful of my hair from the back middle of my scalp and wrenched back hard enough that I felt sections of hair give way and separate from my head. I cried out as she readjusted her grip and forced me within inches of her malevolently twisted face. Pathetic, weak and fragile, she whispered to me in her angel song voice. Don't worry, I'll soon solve that problem for you. Releasing me abruptly, she took a few steps away before asking, which one killed James? They will all pay, but I want to know who to think personally, she finished with a twisted smirk. I said nothing. Oh sweetie, now we can do this the easy way, she told me, where you end up merely dead and forgotten, your mediocrity no longer a blemish on the world around you, or we can do this the hard way. I will gladly show you the same loving care I bestowed on your parents, and believe me, by the time I'm done, I will know every scrap of information you have ever digested in your minute little existence. Still I said nothing. Very well, she sighed as if suffering a great disposition, I suppose I should take you someplace more special for the coming attraction. It wouldn't do to be interrupted by your doggy defenders, now would it? She asked as she slinked in my direction once more. I watched with barely restrained panic as her hand reached forward, this time seemingly in slow motion, only to be interrupted from its course when a large silver form caught her shoulder and mercilessly slammed her, repeatedly, into the ground. As the wolf, Paul, growled and beat the demon vampire, a smaller silver wolf which I knew to be Lee, joined him. Paul then released Victoria, who had gone limp. He moved toward her head and was reaching for it, his gaping jaws dripping, when Victoria deftly rolled underneath Lee and grabbed her. Victoria squeezed brutally, and a strangled yelp tore forth from a shocked Lee. Her snapping ribs sounded to me like thick twigs, breaking under the strain of heavy ice accumulation. Throwing the she-wolf's body to the ground as she emerged, Victoria used Lee as a springboard to pounce on Paul. She landed with precision on his back, and before he could reach back to drag her down, she dealt a single sharp blow. With a nauseating pop, his body crumpled like a marionette whose strings have been cut. She had broken his back. Victoria turned to me once more, and the burning hate smoldering in her fiery eyes told me that my time had come. She didn't bother with speed. She triumphantly sauntered closer, her smile widening with every step. My heart pumped furiously in my chest and I was undeniably terrified, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing either fear or grief on my face as I met my destiny. She was 2 steps away from me when she was pulled away yet again, this time by 2 large brown hands. She may have underestimated the healing time required by the wolves, but Jacob was no match for her lightning speed in his human form. She grabbed his hands where they lay on her upper arms and with a swirling twitch of her stone body, slung him over the edge of the cliff. Now furiously fixed on me for the 3rd time, she missed what I did not. I locked my eyes determinedly on her approaching form. I could not give away any inkling of what was coming. There was no smile on her sadistic face this time as she screamed in my direction, "Why is it so hard to kill you? You should have been nothing more than a small token of revenge for losing my James." I have been forced to skirt around an entire pack of wolves. My newborns, who were created to massacre the furry cretins, were recently decimated by enemies unknown, leaving me no choice but to lay back and lull the pack into a false sense of security. But my time is now, you worthless girl, and I will own every drop of your blood. I will take what should have belonged to my James. But that she lunged, and so did he. Jacob's strong fingers, still gripping the cliff edge, hoisted his long body over the edge. His form blurred in transition as he streaked through the air. His teeth, now those of a wolf, closed around her head and ripped, the violence of the motion whipping her body from its proximity to mine. I had just registered the coldness of her fingers on the skin of my throat when she was yanked down, fingers gouging deeply as she dropped. Through the pain and the shock to my system that losing large amounts of blood quickly causes, I thought of Dad, Mom, Brady, Colin, Emily and her baby. I closed my eyes and felt my life flowing away. I was on my way to join them. Paul, Lee, and Jacob saved me, but Victoria still managed to do this. I signed before making a half-hearted gesture toward my scars. I woke up days later, highly drugged and unable to speak. Jacob was dozing in a chair not far from my bed. When he finally roused from his slumber and noticed my eyes on him, he filled me in on what I had missed. Victoria was most certainly dead. Paul and Lee, though severely injured, would fully recover in time. Sam was dead. He had been the first to cross Victoria's path and was too blinded by his rage and pain to fight effectively. Jacob told me that Sam's fate was actually a blessing in disguise. That if not quickly in battle, he would have died slowly, wasting away from the pain of losing his imprint. The pack had already witnessed the beginning of this scenario through their link. After I lost consciousness, Seth had arrived and immediately put pressure on my throat to keep as much of the blood flow stemmed as possible. With Seth holding me and Jacob carrying us in wolf form, they had rushed me to the reservation medical center. It was a very close call, Jacob told me. My heart apparently stopped twice during the procedures necessary for me to merely survive the night. When I was able, I signed forms allowing Billy Black, Jacob's father, to deal with the clinic on my behalf. He arranged for them to be paid with my father's meager life insurance money. I was grateful it was available, but I also knew there would be very little left once the medical bill was paid. By the time I was healed enough to be released, I had decided to stick to my original plan to leave. Money or no, I could stay there after all that had happened. Jacob was due to pick me up at 11, so at 8 a.m. I scratched out a note asking the receptionist to call me a cab. I left that morning with a pilfered notepad and pen and a backpack full of my clothes and personal items. I instructed the cab driver to head for the bank, then the airport. After emptying and closing my account, I booked the first plane I could catch out of the country Italy. It just so happened, all the while astonishingly grateful, that my mother had always insisted I keep my passport in my purse at all times. So, here I am. I finished lamely, avoiding eye contact with my silent and captive audience. Arrow. I may not be able to read minds without physical contact, and I may not be able to feel others' emotions or visibly judge the strength of one's bonds. But I know my guard and I know my brothers. I can practically taste the tension in the air. If the guard were not as well trained as they are required to be, they are indeed an elite group. I'm quite certain the castle would be requiring many repairs at this moment. Due to the phenomenon that is Isabella Swan, they have already been experiencing an inexplicable concern for her welfare and a draw to be near her. In addition, I can now see admiration, devotion, dare I speculate love, blooming within bodies that many rumor to be incapable of substantial change. They have indeed all changed, and I believe the final impetus was the moment a sweet human girl invited them to share in her life's tragedies, as if they had been good friends of hers, not hours-long acquaintances, or the hardened and ruthless killing machines we all are deep in our beings. My brothers and I underwent a similar change when we were first exposed to Isabella. Caius, being her mate, was the obvious candidate to undergo such an immediate burgeoning of emotion. How it took him more than a few moments to realize her significance to him, I will never know. But shortly after, Isabella infected myself and Marcus as well. She seeped in, filling crevices we had not known were empty, and now her unique form of gentle corruption has spread firmly into the guard. I cannot say that this particular talent of hers does not worry me. Its implications could prove to be a great thing indeed or a catastrophe waiting to happen. For fleeting moments after the discovery of her talents, I seriously considered whether or not she should be allowed to live. After all, she holds a truly devastating potential. Not only is her human form powerful enough to thwart certain vampire powers, including mine, but she also unconsciously compels us to love her. Her removal is of course an impossible situation, for how could I cause such a harm to my brother when I have already seen all too clearly what a devastating effect losing one's mate produces. I believe that if Isabella's disposition had not been so inherently pure and self-sacrificing, I would say that I had met firsthand the one with the power to knock the entire vampire population to its knees. But now is not the proper time for such musings. Marcus will no doubt need some time alone today to recover from such a sad tale. Though still an able fighter, if the situation arises, he has lost his taste for death and violence. With Didim by his side, one could seldom find so formidable a vampire, but now. And Caius, my beloved hot-headed brother, is putting up a valiant effort to hide his true feelings, his berserker rage from Isabella. Speaking of which, I would love to have a more in-depth interview with Mr. Whitlock at some point. I wonder what insight he could provide me on my brother's inner demon. It is almost impossible for vampires to accept injury to a mate. I must admit I am thoroughly impressed with the fortitude Caius shows. I must also remember to place a bet with Marcus as to how long it will take for Caius to convince Isabella to undergo the change. Ah well, I suppose it would be kind of me to clear the room so that Caius and his lady love may have a moment of peace. Rising from my chair, I swept a respectful bow to Isabella. I believe I speak for us all, my dear, when I say that we greatly appreciate the very personal information you have shared with us. Thank you, Isabella, for letting us in. A small ripple of astonishment flashed through me when, instead of filing out directly behind me, the guards stopped, one by one, mere inches from Isabella and Caius. Each dropped a quick bow, so deep that one knee touched the ground before they rose and exited the room. I turned my still wide eyes first to Marcus, who solemnly nodded, answering my unspoken question, then to Caius, who seemed to share in my incredulity. Carlyle and Jasper approached her as the last of the guard exited the room. They looked noticeably uncomfortable and upset by this morning's revelations. "I'm so sorry, Bella," Carlyle began. "We had no idea." He ceased trying to excuse the actions of his family when, shockingly, Isabella glared at him, shook her head no, and pointed to the door. "I understand. I hope in time we can regain your friendship," he replied before ghosting from the room. Even in the face of her obvious disinterest, Jasper remained. Seeing that she was not about to budge and hoping the information might help in some small way to heal the wounds in her heart, I made my way to her side, leaned in close, and whispered. "I believe you might appreciate knowing that 2 members of the Cullen family decided to disregard the decision made by the majority to leave you to live your life without their interference. These 2, in fact, came looking for you to ask forgiveness and offer you the immortality denied you by their brother. They were led to believe you dead, but never gave up hope and have spent the years since searching for you." Tears welled up in her luminous brown eyes as she looked questioningly back at me, then to Caius. "It is true," he confirmed softly. She exhaled loudly and her body shuddered. A large tear fell from each brimming eye before she hastily wiped them away and slid off the bed. She walked slowly to stand before a vampire who many of our own kind would not dare approach. I placed a hand on my brother's arm, hoping to anchor him for this interaction. It would not do for him to snap under his strain and cause accidental injury to Isabella. We both held our unnecessary breath as she came to a stop and merely looked up at the remorseful, scarred blonde vampire. It was apparent a silent conversation of sorts was taking place between the 2. He broke the silence, addressing her aloud. "Yes, we hurt and disappointed you. I won't ask forgiveness. We don't deserve it." She studied him for approximately half a minute longer before tentatively reaching for him. His response was immediate. He swiftly closed the gap between them, allowing her arms to settle about his waist as his own wrapped gingerly around her shoulders. I truly believe that witnessing the innate gentleness displayed for his mate, for Jasper held her as if she were the most delicate of glass, was the only thing that kept Caius rooted to his position in that moment. I could literally feel the quivering tension racking his frame. As for me, I may as well have been watching a polar bear cuddle a baby sea lion. It was almost too much of an oddity for my ancient mind to digest. Jasper Whitlock, who has personally killed more humans and immortals alike than any other vampire in the castle, closed his tawny eyes against the glistening fluid, quickly accumulating in them, and swallowed thickly before he dropped his arms, croaked out an emotional "Thank you, Bella," and darted from the room. Caius relaxed substantially upon Jasper's exit and reached over to give my shoulder a squeeze, thus showing his appreciation of my actions. Marcus and I then left the room together, finally providing Caius and his Isabella some much-needed privacy. Marcus touched my hand shortly after closing the heavy wooden door, confirming my suppositions. Our guard are indeed currently bound tightly to this very special slip of a girl. As the first syllables of concern formed on my tongue, however, I spied a despondent Jane gazing listlessly out of a small window tucked into a shadowed alcove. "We will speak later," I murmured to Marcus before approaching one of the pair of vampires who came close to breaking our own law referencing immortal children. There have been moments that I mourned my decision to save them, as this existence has not always been easy, especially for Jane. "Would you like to talk, dearest?" I asked, reaching out and gripping her elbow gently. She turned her angelic face up to meet mine, its youthful features creased with confusion and sadness. How could they just leave her like that, master? Their actions not only broke the law, but led to the destruction of her family and very nearly cost Isabella to lose her own life. Her exclamation was punctuated with a tiny fist as Jane made a nice little crater in the stone wall. I raised an eyebrow at her slight destruction of the castle but said nothing. She knows my feelings on that subject very well already. Hanging her head she added, you know she didn't even care if she died when she came here, don't you? Oh, my secretly soft-hearted Jane. Without hesitation, I wrapped her in a comforting embrace. It does not surprise me, my dear, but take heart. She is safe here with us now, and we will do all in our power to see that no one harms her again, shall we not? Her answering smile warmed me, for within her shining ruby eyes, I could discern the return of their customarily devilish glint. That's my girl. Only a fool would glare trifle with one who is dear to Jane. Ooh oh. Carlisle. Tree after tree groaned and split under the force Jasper exerted. Boulders crumbled to dust. In time I suppose, this area will make a nice meadow. For now however, with all the destroyed trees and shrubbery debris, it looks like a small natural disaster has taken place. Again and again he lunged, but instead of ripping or punching at them, he merely used them as a poor attempt at damaging his own body. I have seen him like this a few times before. In the early years he would fight against us, whomever happened to be available. Though those incidents were terrifying, the worst part was when it became apparent that he engaged not to win, but to be hurt. He would push and provoke until someone lashed out. Then instead of defending himself, he would take the punishment almost gleefully. I am thankful that he has stopped using us to torture himself. However, seeing him now, bashing his body against the largest trees and rocks he can find, is still just as painful to witness. How could Alice have missed so much? How could I have not have sensed Victoria's connection to James? Why did I have to lose control on her birthday? Oh, what have I done? I strained to hear as Jasper furiously whispered when his madness finally came to a halt. He crouched at the base of a ruined tree, rocking slightly while coming perilously close to ripping out his own hair. Jasper, I called out to him, having learned many decades ago not to approach him when he is buried so deep inside himself. Jasper, you know we all made mistakes, every one of us. It is true that Bella may not be the girl she once was, but she is thankfully still alive. She has begun to forgive you at least, you told me yourself that you felt it. Focus on that. We have a great deal of blame to shoulder, but it is clear that our lives will not be forfeit due to our foolishness, so we must use this as an opportunity to begin again. His troubled eyes locked with mine, the madness slowly leaking away, giving way to reason once more. We will atone. I pledged solemnly. Ooh oh. Caius. Isabella sagged heavily onto her bed the moment the room was cleared. All my rage disappeared in that moment, smothered by concern. What can I do? I asked her helplessly. Smiling weakly, no doubt to try and make me feel better, she took my hand and pulled me to stand directly in front of her. She drew me close, wrapping her arms about my torso and leaning her head low on my chest. I wound one arm around her shoulders, behind her neck, and the other I tangled into her mass of silky hair as I held her to me. Knowing that she is human is not all that hard to accept. Hearing in explicit detail how close she came to death, she who is meant to be mine, terrifies me however, in a way I have never known. When she finally pulled away, she thanked me. Whatever for? I blurted out, my confusion all too clear. For just being here. She explained. For giving me a moment to put it all away. I have come to terms with the path my life has taken, but I still don't like facing the memories. I nodded. Who didn't have elements of their life that were unpleasant to dwell upon? Well then, unless you wish otherwise, perhaps we could procure your morning meal and take a walk in the gardens. I would love a chance to learn some of the happier aspects that make up Miss Isabella Swan. Her face lit up in excitement, and that was all the answer I needed. If you will excuse me then, I will give you a moment to change into your day clothes and fetch you something to break your fast. Unable to withstand the call of her once again smiling lips, I dropped a quick kiss onto their softness and embarked on my food-finding mission. Heading toward the kitchen, hoping for once to encounter one of our human staff there, I was thankfully spared the irritating prospect of conversing with them by the sight of Jane heading my way with a small tray. You Jane, are a lifesaver. I exclaimed. Her laugh filled the hall. And just how many others in the castle are there that can even identify human food? She asked dryly. Certainly not I. Thankfully dear Jane, you have saved me the effort. She thrust the tray into my hands, exasperatedly explaining that it held Isabella's favorite coffee, an apple, which I could have identified myself, thank you very much, and a generous slice of an odd-looking pie Jane called quiche. She further explained that it contained potatoes, sausage, eggs and cheese. Curling my lip slightly at the disgusting-looking food, I nonetheless thanked Jane and made my way back upstairs. Isabella had changed her attire by the time I returned. Today she wore a lovely green blouse in what I have been lately instructed is called the peasant style, along with a dark grey pair of pants. I surprised me to see that she had braided back the front sections of her hair, similar to the way Jane had styled it, which resulted in the bulk of her hair being pushed behind her shoulders instead of shading her lovely neck. I drank in her beauty but did not comment, for she already had hungry eyes locked on the tray in my hands. Apparently the food tasted better than it looked because she devoured it quickly and did not leave even the tiniest crumb on her plate. Once she had returned from brushing her teeth again, I took her arm in mine and led her proudly through the castle to my favorite garden. We spent almost a full hour admiring the ingenious landscaping put in place by Sulpicia. Just having Isabella beside me sends a rush of emotion coursing through my being. I find that I can somehow manage to be both jubilant and calm at the same time. As we walked, we traded information of the trivial sort, favorite novels, hobbies, and the like. Every moment spent in her company further convinces me that I am ruined for all other forms of companionship. Nothing anyone can say will ever be as interesting as what I can learn from this woman. No beauty will ever match hers. No heart will ever be as kind. Her scent overwhelms me and drowns out all others. I am lost to her. I look longingly upon her glowing face as she animatedly describes growing up in the desert, and a pang of uncertainty catches me in its grip. I didn't realize I had stopped walking until she was before me with her warm hand on my cheek and her eyes filled with concern. My words faltered. How could I expect her to understand the immediate and burning love that has taken me hostage since meeting her? She would surely believe me insincere. Her past experiences must have jaded her opinion on what love means to a vampire. She could reject me. I don't know how my breaths became raw and agitated. She was gripping my arms now, silently begging me to explain my distress. No words would come and in the end I let my body lead me instead of my mind. I swept her into my arms, lifting her body so it was pressed flush with mine, and I kissed her. I poured my love and my fears out upon her lips, and she caught them graciously. Her mouth moved eagerly with mine, devouring, comingling. One tiny hand gripped my shoulder while the other wrapped behind my neck, her thumb stroking maddeningly across the hollow just below my ear. I pulled away just enough to scatter feather-like kisses across her beautiful face, each punctuated with a silent sentiment. Cheek, I need you. Brow, I cannot live without you. Eyelid, I love you so much it hurts. Nose, please be mine. Chin, it's only been days, but I am yours. Returning her to her feet, I mastered myself once more. Please forgive me, Isabella. But she did not let me continue. She pulled herself up determinedly, fisting her hands in my robes for leverage, and silenced me with another searing press of her lips. I was losing myself again quickly in her embrace when our moment was shattered by a vulgar whoop that echoed off the stone walls of the garden. That's how it's done. The soon-to-be dismembered individual shouted. Turning with Isabella held tight in my arms, I glared at the intruder. He was the tall burly sort who would no doubt have put me in mind of Felix, if not for the mop of curly dark hair and completely childish glee that covered his face. His smile was so wide it caused dimples to sink into his cheeks. Beside him stood a statuesque blonde who looked as if she wished the earth could just rear up and swallow her whole. The growl had just begun to rattle my chest when Isabella sucked in an uneven breath and her hand twitched lightly against my arm. Looking down, all thoughts of destruction were wiped from my mind as I witnessed the tentative longing of my mate. Marcus had warned me. She will need these vampires in some capacity if she is to make a healthy transition to immortality. If I ever get the opportunity to speak with her about it, that is. Tamping down my resentment at having to share her once again, I questioned my lady. Do you wish to see them? I can easily send them away. She sent me an apologetic glance before signing her reply. Yes, I think I would like to see Emmett. Rosalie can stay if she must. Ooh, oh. Edward. Don't worry, my love. This misunderstanding with the Volturi will be cleared up soon enough. I don't know who they believe they have with them in Italy. You've been here with me this whole time. No, I don't believe they would begrudge us wanting to delay your change until after the wedding so your father can walk you down the aisle. Arrow and Carlisle have a long history. I'm so glad you finally agreed to be my bride. We will be together forever, my love. Nothing will ever separate us. I was right, my mother's ring looks fantastic on your delicate hand. No, I suppose the family hasn't been very supportive of our relationship lately, but don't let them spoil our happiness. They'll soon realize that we were meant to be. You were made for me. Oh. Do you know what would be perfect? We could take an extended trip all on our own after the wedding. We can start out on Isle What? I've never told you about that. Well, yes, they do own an island. That's just something you'll have to become accustomed to as a Cullen, my love. We like to give extravagant gifts. Carlisle gave the island to us 1 year for their anniversary, and I think it will be the perfect place for us to begin our life as man and wife, don't you? You smell so delicious. How I hunger for you. Feeling your soft skin against mine is almost my undoing. I knew that one day I would be able to overcome my desire for your blood. Who knew the answer was to replace it with another desire? Yes, come closer, my love. Caius. The two newcomers crossed through a narrow opening in one of the many low decorative hedges defining the garden's pathways. Opposites in almost every way, they did not at first glance seem particularly suited for one another. The male was tall, with a tight cropping of dark curly hair and an excessively brawny frame. The happy, albeit absent look on his face made it abundantly clear that his brain was not amongst the muscles this vampire often exercised. He was also not bothered in the slightest by the murderous glare I had trained upon him. Following a half-step behind came a svelte female, her lover's contrast in almost every discernible way. She possessed long luminous blonde locks, a haughty demeanor, and her handsome features loudly telegraphed disdain for her current task. She appeared most thoroughly underwhelmed at seeing Isabella, while her partner, puppyish to the extreme, bounced energetically along, practically vibrating with excitement. How disgusting. Beside me, Isabella's tension was palpable, humming in the air between us, seeping into my arms nestled as they were about her waist, though her face showed no great change of emotion. Having expected them to adhere to at least the most basic of social niceties by making civilized introductions, I was woefully and inexcusably unprepared when the oaf charged right up, rudely invading our personal space. It can only be assumed that the fool is either deaf or preposterously ignorant, for neither the blatant warning rumbling within my chest nor the sudden and visibly rigid stance adopted by Isabella influenced the way he chose to address her. "Hey there, Belsie. Looking good. We've sure missed you, girl." The oaf leaned forward, sharing what he must have believed to be a conspiratorial wink. "I couldn't believe it when I heard you're shacking up with the volturi these days. When you rub elbows with the supernatural you really go all the way, don't you, girl? You're turning into a regular vampire fangirl," he ended, waggling his eyebrows. I barely registered the look of shock on the blonde female's face or the sharply indrin breath beside me before I snapped. In that one instant it was all just too much. He was too close, insulting my mate, my silent angel, bearing a permanent and daily reminder of pain and suffering due to nothing more than the alarming stupidity and negligence of this family. The very family I am unable to send to their final death because it will displease the one who matters above all. His overlarge body gave him no leverage against my speed and experience. Before he even registered the threat, he was on the ground. I locked his arms tight behind his back and crouched down. As he began to struggle I grabbed his chin with my right hand and stretched his grimacing face toward the sky until the building pressure caused tension cracks to begin forming along his thick neck. I was soaking in the thrill of my victory when suddenly Isabella rushed into view. Her face, so close to mine, was ashen, filled with desperate tears as she shook her head, silently begging me to release my quarry. My vision tunneled onto her face as emotions warred within me. I was disturbed, yes, by the thought of causing her pain, but she cannot expect me to accept such behavior, can she? Why, if not for her, he would already be a pile of ash for daring to speak so to someone in her station, and to see such censure on her face when my actions were meant solely for her benefit and protection was impossible to accept. I tried desperately to ignore my gut reaction to lash out, but clouding my rational mind was the cloying and sickly fog of betrayal. Her twisted expression telegraphed clearly just how much she detested my actions. The shimmering tears sparkling and dripping from her lovely brown eyes are shed not for me. No, her tears spill for the vampire beneath me, the one whose first words to her in years carried insult to her character. I've been a fool to believe that she so easily understood me. I would be willing to give her anything and everything. I would burn the world to the ground if she asked me, but she will not do the same for me. I see now that no matter the depth of my bond to her, she is either incapable or chooses not to reciprocate. Fear and hurt resulting from my grave introspection tempered my words. "So they still own your loyalty, do they, Isabella?" I asked in barely a whisper. "These creatures have gleefully ruined your life, and yet you cast such looks upon me for merely defending your honor. I understand. Please, do not let me keep you from your lovely reunion." I spat as I smashed the fool's head back to the ground and fled from the source of this exquisite torment and her haunting eyes. "Ooh, oh. Bella." I stared uselessly at Caius as he walked away from me. My brain ground to a screeching halt. Just minutes ago we were in each other's arms, sharing a perfect moment in time. I breathed him in, pulling his essence deep into my reluctant soul, endeavoring to embrace the love he offered so freely. Still staring at his retreating back as it disappeared inside the castle, I failed to notice my rapid and ragged increase in respiration or the racing heart beneath my ribs. "He's leaving," my mind taunted. "He's giving up already. It must be your natural talent, Bella, to ruin every chance at a happy life." I pictured my future with the volturi, the existence I was finally allowing myself to imagine and anticipate, falling determinedly beyond my reach. A faint tremor took hold of my hands, the hands which had so recently been carding through smooth blonde silk. His ruby eyes were cold and distant when he looked upon me just now. The vibrations in my hands spread to take hold of my entire body. Why did he react that way? I just couldn't bear to see him hurting Emmett for being himself. But more importantly, why am I reacting this way? Rationally, I know that Caius will speak to me again after he calms down. I've known he has a short fuse since we met in the cave. Why then the depressing thoughts, and why can't I seem to get enough air? I sucked more and more oxygen into my useless lungs and clutched a hand to my chest as the world tilted on its axis. I wobbled and felt my knees hit, thankfully not the garden path but a soft patch of moss alongside. Concentrating as I was now on the slow suffocating death I seemed to be experiencing, it took me more than a few moments to hear the calls of distress from Emmett and Rosalie. "Bella. Bella. Are you okay?" Emmett asked helplessly, his voice rising to a pitch I'd never heard from him. "Bella, breathe slowly. Look at me now, good. In, hold and out." Rosalie's more helpful input finally began to make a difference. "Okay. Again. In, hold and out." My heart rate steadily returned to normal, but the discomfort and jitters remained. My skin felt like it was crawling about freely on my frame. I couldn't stop replaying the look I saw on Caius's face when I pleaded for him to stop. Why was he so angry with me? "Bella, listen," Rosalie demanded sternly, "first I'm going to help you up and we are going to find Caius. It would also be a good idea for you to talk to Carlisle later. Don't worry, everything will be fine." I couldn't for the life of me understand why Rosalie was currently exhibiting an ability to give a damn, but considering my current indisposition, I figured the matter would best be pursued at a later time. She hauled me to my feet, supporting my graceless weight easily with one arm, and we set off into the castle. It took a ridiculously short amount of time to determine Caius's location. Vicious snarls punctuated with forbidding crashes couldn't fail to catch our attention. It was against my better judgment to disturb Caius in his current state of mind, and I tried to hang back, but Rosalie had no such qualms. When we reached the door separating us from the sound of gratuitous destruction, she threw it open wide and stormed inside, pulling me quite unwillingly behind. Luckily, she also shielded me from the flying shards of a large ceramic vase as it shattered on the doorframe immediately following our entrance. Through the swirling cloud compassed of what I assumed to be powdered remnants of the room's contents, I caught Caius's gleaming red eyes and saw them widen momentarily before anger clouded his expression once more. "You have no right to intrude here." He ground out, glancing fleetingly at Rosalie before fixing his stare decidedly on Emmett. "Leave, while I allow it." Rosalie turned, looking utterly unconcerned by the threat from the furious Volturi king. "Give us a minute I'll be right out." Emmett meanwhile, looked torn between listening to his wife and leaving her in very possible danger. "Go on." She chided him. So, with one last doubtful look, he turned and pulled the door closed behind him. "You're being an idiot," she stated bluntly to the enraged blonde king still fuming before her. Caius must have been well and truly shocked by the audacity of her words, because instead of ripping her head off immediately, as I half expected, he stood stock still just staring at her, not even breaking his incredulous gaze to blink, not that he needed to. I'm pretty sure if I hadn't been in such an odd state myself I could have found the situation comical. Then his eyes shifted to me, cataloging my labored breathing and the shaking fists clenched tightly to my body. Suddenly, he was so close I could feel his coolness filling the minute gap left between us. I shivered violently once more, and my heart stuttered when he took my hands gently within his own, the insistent tremors stilling almost immediately in his soothing grasp. "What happened? Did they hurt you?" he demanded. Rosalie snorted. "Not us. You did this," she retorted with a flippant wave in his direction. "Watch yourself, woman," Caius growled in her direction as he bent to lift me with one arm behind my back and the other under my knees. He then cast an eye about the destroyed room. Finding what he required, he picked his way through the detritus. He carried me as if I weighed no more than a feather and deposited me carefully onto the only piece of intact furniture in the room, a red velvet upholstered claw footchair pushed far into the corner. I heard the door open and close once again, most likely Rosalie leaving, but I didn't look to see. Caius knelt in front of me then, and for a moment I thought perhaps I would find out just what had upset him so badly in the garden. He hadn't sent me away but brought me farther into his destroyed sanctuary. I discarded that thought however when he tipped his head to look at me. His expression remained painfully aloof, and I cringed at the thought of being here invading his space when he clearly didn't want to be anywhere near me right now. I made to stand up, thinking I would find Carlisle and ask him about my strange episode, but Caius kept his hands locked on top of my legs, preventing my desired escape. His lips parted as if he were about to speak, but instead, with a defeated sigh, he dropped his head into my lap. The movement caused him to shift his hands around to my hips, while his nose wedged itself firmly between my inner thighs. Before my mind had time to realize how embarrassed it should probably be by his position, it registered Caius's unusual bearing. He looked so defeated, slumped there on my lap, and I couldn't even begin to guess what was affecting him so. Without conscious thought or permission, my hands wound their way into his pale golden locks. I rubbed the pads of my fingers firmly down the plane of his scalp, feeling the silky strand separate and slip through my hands as I went along. He released a stuttered breath as well as some of the tension in his shoulders, so I continued my efforts, firmly massaging his head, adding in a small orbital motion as well. When he finally lifted his face from its impromptu pillow, his eyes were the gentle ones I had become accustomed to. "I'm sorry," he said so softly I barely made out the words, though they were dripping in remorseful sincerity. I was angry and I allowed it to cloud my judgment. I despise the way the Cullens have treated you, and it violates my very nature to allow them to live, let alone welcome their presence in my home and around you after what they have caused. I admit, outside I was stung by the look in your eyes. I was sure that you were censuring me choosing that oaf over me, and I found I couldn't bear the rejection that threatened to cut me so deeply. Can you forgive me? I thought about what he told me, trying to make it all make sense. I do understand that being territorial is a common part of the vampire psyche. I also know that there is a massive amount of she-is-mine-ism coursing through his system due to our fledgling relationship, which would make his already hot temper more likely to flare. But what I don't understand is why my attempt at preventing venom shed, would have agitated Caius to such an extreme. No matter what they've done to me, Caius, I wouldn't like to see them hurt. I explained to him, my hands forming the words effortlessly now that the tremors had fully subsided. I've seen enough hurt to last my entire lifetime. A silent and humorless laugh escaped me. I can't even stand to squash a spider anymore. I end up tossing them outside. This anecdote earned me a half smile, so I continued on. I'm not very good with feelings anymore, so please just listen. I don't know where exactly this thing between us is heading, but I can tell you that even if I am able to completely forgive the Cullens, they will never be as close to my heart as they once were. I've lost too much as a consequence of their actions, and though I believe they are remorseful, they still didn't take my wishes or feelings into account, even though they swore I was a member of the family. I'm taking one last chance on family taking a chance on the volturi. You guys have the top slot. I'm working to open myself up one last time for you, Caius, and the rest of my new friends. I'm feeling more at peace here with every passing day, but honestly, I'm afraid. Now, knowing that you have the power to unsettle me as much as I was just now frankly terrifies me. So please, try to be patient with me. If I do something that upsets you, please let me know instead of pushing me away. Oh Isabella, he murmured, brushing my cheek gently with his own as he nuzzled into my neck. I am truly sorry. Then his arm snaked under and around me, lifting to settle me, this time on his cool legs, as he took my place in the chair himself. I relaxed back against his strong frame and enjoyed the sensation of blissful relaxation as it began to make its way through my stressed body. His soft hair tickled my face as he leaned his head onto mine. I cannot apologize enough. He continued, I would never intentionally cause my mate pain. He breathed into my ear. I know he felt my body freeze as that word passed his lips. Mate. He said mate. One word to cover 1,000 deceptions. An excuse for vampires to play with humans' emotions. Vampires may be able to form such impenetrable bonds to each other, but with a human? Doubtful. Old wounds plagued me, insecurities wormed themselves through my being. Mate. Has this all been an elaborate game? A way to break the monotony of thousands of years? Lies. Loneliness. Fear. Pain. Distraction. I'm familiar with this game. I can't play it again. Caius warily held my eyes without fail, no doubt watching the screaming wheels in my brain as they fought to reach the correct conclusions. Mate. What I felt for Edward died a fiery death during my struggles to stay alive while Victoria relentlessly sought my end. Mate. The compulsion I felt in the cave to save this vampire's life at the expense of my own. How I couldn't imagine a world in which he didn't exist. Mate. The grounded feeling of peace growing steadily in my soul, the painless flames lighting me from within when his lips touched mine. Can it be? I tilt my head slightly as truth settles over me. This is why Caius overreacted. Not because of Emmett, but because he has already become aware of our supposed bond and believed I would not accept it. I can't do this right now. I signed to him, the pain and confusion in my heart overwhelming me. Please don't stop me, I need to think. With that I stood, simultaneously relieved and saddened by the sensation of his arms leaving me, and I walked away, desperate to flee the source of such anguish. I strode determinedly through the unfamiliar hallway, my trek made more difficult by the tears now obscuring my vision. Shadows loomed all around me as I continued on, searching for anything familiar. I swept the tears away, only to have my eyes immediately fill again. Raising my hand once more to wipe them away, I missed the deepening darkness ahead and didn't notice the danger until my right foot found nothing but air. Staircase, my tension-addled mind provided 1 second too late. I reached blindly for a rail, but found nothing. My foot finally made contact, only to awkwardly hit the outer edge of a stair and slide off, twisting my ankle as it gave way. With a sharp gasp I awaited the coming pain. Ooh. Of. What a disappointing hunt. The woman I chose smelled somewhat appetizing at first, but after being exposed to Isabella's bouquet for so long, my quarry didn't quite satisfy me as much as she might have in the past. Isabella smells truly divine. Her blood just begs to be spilled. None of us can figure out how it is that she has lived among vampires so long and not been drained or turned. Yeah, even turning her would be fantastic, a quick pop through her pale skin, and a few greedy mouthfuls of that mouth-watering nectar before pulling back and letting the venom do its work. I'd better stop that train of thought. Arrow will cease sooner or later, not that he hasn't thought about it himself, but I know he wouldn't approve. I rounded the next corner, my quarters and a much-needed shower, coming closer every moment when I heard a small gasp. My eyes flicked to the far end of the passageway just in time to see Isabella wrench her ankle on the stairs and start to fall. There was no chance of me being close enough to prevent her from falling, but I raced to stop her descent as soon as possible. The walls blurred beside me, and when I was near enough I lunged forward, grabbing her tumbling body, hoping that I could manage to cause her less injury, then slamming mercilessly into the stone steps and the floor of the rapidly approaching landing. I winced when I closed my arms around her and felt a definite snap. Damn. I looked at my hand, closed much too tightly around her left leg, and prayed that Caius would not dismember me. Her tightly closed eyes snapped open as she threw her head back in a silent scream. I drew in a hasty breath to try and apologize, reassure her, calm her, anything, but in that instant her scent, her insanely appealing blood rammed into my senses and flooded my mind. Any vampire in the castle could identify this blood in any crowd, and a lonely corridor is sadly lacking in distractions from her enthralling aroma. I swallowed thickly, my previous meal doing nothing to extinguish the burn, her blood ignited, literally hanging in the air as it was. Even the stairs themselves taunted me, painted with lovely shimmering red. My traitorous eyes fixed on the wounds causing her body to glisten with a sinfully intoxicating substance. No. 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 Off limits. I shook my head hard, attempting to regain focus. Isabella. 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 I chanted her name in my mind as I fought the siren call more passionately than any other moment in my existence. Aside from secrecy, I had never had much occasion or desire to deny myself. This meal, however decadent, would most definitely cause my permanent death. I strained to see her as my mind wanted, a valued member of our coven, a sister, my future queen. Through the penetrating fog of my bloodlust, I noticed tears streaming freely down her battered face and heard her panting, clearly pained, breaths. Isabella. I managed to grunt past clenched teeth. Her name came out as a harsh growl, and I began to fear that I would not overcome this temptation, that I would soon succumb to the madness threatening to take hold. I am so sorry. She could easily pose a threat to our way of life. Surely you can see it as well as I. And what would you do, Arrow? She is Caius's mate. She belongs here. You saw what happened, Marcus. Surely you cannot ignore the implications. If she continues on unimpeded in this vein, she could turn the whole of the castle against us once she is changed. What if we have only caught a glimpse of how her powers would manifest as an immortal? You are ignoring the other more pleasant possibility, Arrow, that fate herself has delivered her to us and is granting her a seamless transition into a family that will cherish and protect her for all time. She grows attached to us as well, more so with every passing moment. No influence has been exerted by Chelsea in any capacity, and yet her bonds grow steadily. I don't trust her. Arrow responded petulantly. Marcus studied the vampire before him, pacing, agitated. He sensed something else was belying Arrow's uncharacteristic discomfiture. You're afraid? Marcus accused softly. When Arrow's form suddenly stilled, Marcus knew he had found the underlying issue. You're afraid to care for the girl, to trust her. He pressed on. A jerky nod was the only forthcoming reply. But it's too late. Marcus mused, you're already coming to care for the girl as more than just an acquisition or an asset. You are beginning to appreciate her for who she is and not merely what she can do for you. How can I not? Arrow asked, his voice cracking with uncharacteristic emotion. I have seen her goodness. I have seen her wit and vivacity, shining lovely and bright. Carlyle's memories were a blessing and a curse on that front. I saw just how wonderful a girl she was, and I cannot reconcile that with the damaged young woman Caius has found. Will she recover emotionally, Marcus? She is pleasant, yes, but is she capable of harboring any great depth of emotion? I'm not so sure after viewing what Mr. Whitlock had to show me. I felt how happy and whole she was with them in the past, and I also unfortunately know that her current baseline emotions are wariness and, without a better description for it, a readiness for flight. She would make an unstable newborn, at best, right now. Add to that the fact that the entire castle seems ready to fall over themselves to lick her feet, and I think it would be safe to say that yes, the girl terrifies me. If we had to contain her. He stood there motionless, taking a moment to regulate his rapid breathing. Hanging his head, he murmured, "Brother, you know I would never try to belittle the depth of your sorrow at losing Didim, but it was hard for me as well. I am afraid to care so deeply for and lose another sister." Marcus did not respond, his gaze fixed on events in a faraway past. Days of happiness and love. Days when surviving had not yet become a chore. "You've never asked, even though rumors and accusations pointed." "No, I did not." Marcus broke in sharply. "Nor will I ever. For the love of all that is holy. Someone help me." The grim atmosphere surrounding the two ancient vampires dissolved immediately when the desperate cry of alarm reached their ears. Both brothers flew from their location in one of the castle's smaller galleries, Marcus upsetting a chair in his haste, and made their way in the direction of the shout. As they drew nearer to the guard quarters, they picked up the whispering feet of multiple approaching vampires in adjacent corridors. Arrow and Marcus internally approved of the quick reaction time until they registered the scent drenching the corridor and shared a look of undisguised panic. Isabella's blood was potent in the air, and for a moment they feared the worst. "No one approach," Arrow ordered, wanting to avoid mixing a group of vampires into a situation with freely flowing blood. The brothers continued forward only after verifying that all other footsteps had halted. Seconds later the pair locked eyes on a large black-eyed vampire, standing 1/3 of the way up a flight of stairs, body taut from his Herculean efforts at restraint. Isabella was cradled tightly, very obviously injured in the hungry vampire's arms. A cut on her forehead birthed a vibrant rivulet of blood which trailed a lazy path down the back of the vampire's supporting hand and forearm. At first glance she might almost appear to be sleeping, but on closer inspection, it was plain that her body was trembling. Arrow quickly assessed the situation. The cavernous black eyes denoted a fierce hunger, but the vampire was not breathing. It could be assumed that he used his supply of oxygen calling out and was avoiding further temptation by stemming his respiration. "Will you allow me to peacefully retrieve her from you?" Arrow asked gently, verifying there would be no dispute. After receiving an immediate and insistent nod he stepped forward fluidly, reaching out to take the injured girl into his own arms. Just before his hands made contact with the bleeding body, the vampire before him drew in a single draft of air, accompanied immediately by deeply rumbling growls. Through the reverberations he enunciated, "Mind this leg," and with a small tap of his finger, indicated the aforementioned limb. Of course, Arrow agreed, relieved that the situation had not turned into a fight, and drew Isabella carefully into his embrace. He appreciated the insight of his faithful guardsman when the vampire deliberately brushed his fingers across the back of his master's hand. Arrow's lightning-quick mind efficiently assimilated the information, and he gifted the vampire with a small upturning of his lips. "You've done well, Felix, now go get some air. Isabella, we will get you medical attention as soon as possible, my dear." She fisted her hands in the front of his shirt and tried to relax her smarting frame. "What happened?" Marcus inquired, following Arrow as he carried Isabella toward her chambers. "A moment, brother. Jane." Arrow barked out, before lowering his voice to explain. Felix came upon her as she twisted her ankle and began to fall down the staircase. He rushed to catch her and fears he may have broken her leg in the process of scooping her up. He then became overwhelmed by her blood and froze in place before his mind could convince him to have a sample. At that moment Jane rushed into view, and her eyes flew wide with alarm at seeing the condition of her friend, who had by this point ground her forehead into Arrow's breastbone in a failing attempt at distracting herself from her discomfort. "Master?" she asked, her voice taut with concern. "Find Carlyle at once and bring him to Isabella's chambers," Arrow ordered. "Inform him that she is injured and bleeding. Tell him he may bring Mr. Whitlock if the scent will not overwhelm him. He could perhaps be useful for anesthetic purposes." Jane darted away, leaving Arrow to address Marcus once more. "Do not fear, brother, I do not believe she is irreparably harmed, I am most concerned with managing her pain. With Carlyle in-house we may be able to avoid the hospital. One of us will need to fetch Caius once she is settled." Isabella's back stiffened visibly at his last words, a movement that did not go unnoticed by either vampire. They shared a look and wondered to themselves what could have happened to bring about that response. Caius and Demetri regarded the tall blonde vampire before them with suspicious eyes. They stood on the outskirts of Volterra, a fair distance from the castle, but far closer than Caius was comfortable with. He did not want this strange visitor one step closer to his vulnerable mate. "You wanted to see me?" the male asked calmly. He was immaculate in a pair of charcoal slacks, a crisp white shirt, matching gray vest and an ice blue tie. His smooth silver blonde hair fell to his shoulders and, parted as it was with a sharp line down the center, covered all but a slim line down the median of his face. "We have heard many reports of you, Peter," Caius began. "We intend to investigate these claims." "Is that so?" Peter asked with a wry grin. He casually pulled the curtain of his hair away from the right side of his face to expose scarring gruesome enough to surprise both of the vampires facing him. Caius and Demetri took in the ruined face with unveiled astonishment. The outer section of his right eyebrow was completely missing. A row of teeth marks crossed its previous location, ending their line at the corner of his eye. One fraction farther to the left and he would no doubt be devoid of that eye. The corresponding row of crescent marks lay across the top of his cheekbone, but that was not the worst of it. Instead of merely leaving rows of scarring in the shape of partial wounds, deep gouges were present where the attacking teeth had fully closed down on Peter's face, removing the chunk of flesh entirely. Among other sets of overlapping scars was another vicious pockmark where another section had been removed from the lower edge of his cheek to his jawbone. His genial expression turned deadly and he promised, most of them are probably true. I will need to see an X-ray. Carlyle explained. The scrapes on her face are superficial and will heal quickly. Her leg, however, could have a stress fracture and it will need to be treated accordingly. So the bone is not fully broken? Marcus inquired. Carlyle sighed, thankfully, no. It would be painfully obvious if that were the case. When a full fracture of the femur occurs, the muscles and tendons react rather violently. They spasm, and the force can be great enough to dislodge the bone from its natural position and force it through the flesh of the leg. If that had occurred, she would almost certainly have required a metal rod, known as a pin, inserted surgically to restore the leg's integrity. He took in the disgusted expressions on the brothers' faces. Yes, my sentiments exactly. Nevertheless, we still need to determine the extent of internal damage. You told me Felix heard a snap. He asked Arrow, who replied in the affirmative. Then I need to get her scanned as soon as possible. Has anyone found Caius? He is not within the castle and I do not know when to expect him back. He could be out a few more hours still. Apparently he and Demetri went to meet a vampire we have been attempting to compile intelligence on. Arrow explained. We cannot wait for his return. I will accompany her. Marcus said softly, to the mild astonishment of his brother. It had, after all, been centuries since he left the castle proper. With your permission I would like to go as well. Jasper added from the shadowy periphery of the room where he leaned leisurely against the wall. Marcus had no reaction to the request. His attention remained focused on Isabella. She looked unhappy about the idea of the hospital, but did not appear quite up to the task of raising a protest. Arrow mulled the logistics over. One of the kings must remain in the castle, Caius is currently unreachable, and he did not want to discourage Marcus from this small foray into the world beyond the castle gates. He would rather choose a member of the guard to accompany them, but Jasper is, after all, a seasoned warrior and can be trusted to follow through with whatever level of protection the small group might require during their excursion. Very well. Isabella, Carlyle, Marcus and Jasper will go to the hospital. I will remain here to await Caius's arrival and attempt to keep him here until you return. I know you're awake, Bella. Jasper whispered in her ear when Carlyle and Marcus left the room to confer with the attending physician. She peeled her eyelids open reluctantly to face the too annoying for his own good vampire smirking at her from the hospital chair at the left of her bed. She looked around the small room, then made a distinctive motion with her hand. Jasper easily recognized her symbol for Caius. No, he's not here. He felt her emotions fluctuate from disappointment to nervousness, finally landing on fear. What are you afraid of, Bella? Has he hurt you? Jasper asked seriously. King or no, nobody was going to hurt this girl again if he could help it. His concerns, however, seemed to be unfounded when she began to shake her head emphatically no. Well then, we've got a little time. What do you say we play a little game? She shot him a bewildered look, so he clarified. I'll try to figure out what's bothering you and you concentrate on a feeling that might lead me to the correct conclusion. Here we go. I think you and Caius may have had a conversation this morning that was a little too deep for you. Surprise. Yeah, I'm not just pretty looks, he winked. I've got some smarts too. Amusement. So, did Caius drop the M-bomb? Jasper asked, using his fingers to make quotation signs in the air. Fear. Sadness. Doubt. Hope. Yeah, I thought so. Look, Bella, he sighed as he ran a hand through his mess of wavy blonde hair. I can understand why you'd be scared and reminded about how things went the last time. Pain. But please don't let that affect what you have going on between you and Caius. Doubt. Frustration. Okay, how about this, I'll show you what Edward felt toward you. Mild anxiety. Jasper drew together the essences of Edward's emotions and sent them to Bella. He made her feel the possessiveness, euphoria, guilt, frustration and pleasure Edward experienced around her. There was a sampling of love, but it was overshadowed and swallowed by the less than pure feelings teeming around it. She unfortunately also felt the contempt and hysteria Edward had begun to feel in reference to the power her blood had over him. Jasper pulled his influence away and gave her a moment to process, wondering what a reaction would be. Pain. Sadness. Embarrassment. We all thought it had to do with you being human. I swear, Bella. We believed he loved you and that once you were changed and your blood was no longer a factor that the issues he was experiencing would go away. But then he refused to change you. He huffed out a breath and was hit by an idea. Tentatively he asked her, do you want to feel what Caius feels for you? Trepidation. Hope. Bella sucked in a sharp breath when the projected emotions hit her like a blow to the chest. It was brilliant, flowing and swelling through her, live and intense. It was pure and beautiful and she's been an absolute idiot, she realizes suddenly. Tears spring to her eyes and she casts a panicked glance at Jasper. Don't worry, Bella, he crooned gently as he smooths a hand down her cheek, stealing her tears in the process. A love like that isn't going anywhere. Whatever happened between you two can be straightened out when you get back. He needs you, Bella. Can you let yourself need him? Jasper leaned over to kiss her forehead, then stood and walked to the door. Think on that a bit, I'm going to see how soon we can bust you out of this joint. Smells awful in here. Can I let myself need him? She asked herself, alone in the solitude of her mind. She knew what love she had for Edward had been destroyed while Victoria relentlessly hunted her. According to vampire mythos, one does not recover from losing a mate. I see it every time I look at Marcus. Apparently he's recently been functioning on a much higher level than he has at any point since losing his mate, but it's still there, that bone-deep weariness and suffering he carries. So if Edward truly were meant for me, I would never have been able to move on from him. I remember needing to help Caius in some way when I found him in the cave. At the beginning, companionship was enough to satisfy the pull in my soul. Later it called upon me to give my blood. I had thought it was just my long-standing depression helping me find a way out of the lonely monotony, but I'm beginning to recognize it for what it really was. My soul was crying out to save him at any cost. It subconsciously acknowledged what my mind was unable to at the time, that it could not survive in the world if he did not. I thought about the grounded feeling of peace chipping away at my fear and distrust, that calming influence that grows stronger every day, the painless flames lighting me from within when his lips touch mine. I feel a smile steal over my face as the truth settles over me like a comforting blanket. Caius is my mate. It's okay to let myself need him. Bella, as soon as we've gone through and signed your discharge papers we can be on our way. Carlyle informed her. She rolled her eyes, but sent him a small smile. Firstly, you will experience localized swelling and pain. Considering the location of your injury, you may experience pain in your groin area as well as your thigh. Her face went cherry red in an instant at this proclamation, while Jasper and Marcus turned their gazes resolutely to the ceiling, trying to spot imperfections. Yes, well, moving on, you should avoid using that limb as much as possible over the next few weeks to make sure the bone has a chance to rest and recover. Your right ankle is mildly sprained as well, so the next few days are not going to be fun. Bella cocked an eyebrow at the massive understatement. Somewhere around the 4-week mark, you can start putting weight on your left leg again. Carlyle had no trouble whatsoever lip-reading the explicative that fell from Bella's lips. That's not all, I'm afraid. After you bear weight with no ill effects, you will have to start a low-impact program to rebuild your strength until you are fully recuperated. Her face clearly showed her disappointment at such a lengthy recovery period, and she honestly had no idea how she was going to handle being so much more helpless, living in a fortress of super beings. Talk about a morale killer. She reached out to snatch the papers from Carlyle's patient hands and signed with an angry flourish, crossing her arms petulantly across her chest as Jasper broke into a fit of laughter. What do you mean she's not here? Caius roared. It had been exquisite agony to leave this morning, knowing very well how unsettled Isabella was after his slip of the tongue. Demetri approached him immediately after Isabella vacated the room with word that Peter was in town and had agreed to meet. It was now late in the evening. Many lonely hours had passed and he had expected to find her somewhat cooled down and perhaps ready for a discussion about their situation. Well, you see, Caius, the truth of the matter is arrow-edged. Just spit it out. She's in the hospital. Caius felt his legs wobble and panic stabbed at him. He made to run from the throne room, but Arrow had been expecting this flight and grasped his shoulders tightly. Peace, brother. Peace. She will be fine. She is probably already on her way back. She is safe and protected by Marcus, Carlyle and Jasper. Isabella has had the best of care available. This rambling litany of information, meant to soothe, was cut off abruptly by Jane flitting through the throne room's giant wooden doors. They're back. Master Marcus is getting her settled into her room. Caius need no prompting. He had barely heard the words, proclaiming that his Isabella was in residence once more, before he departed through the door Jane had just entered. There you are, my dear, can I get you anything? Marcus asked as he settled Isabella into her bed. She reached out and grasped the hand nearest hers and squeezed it, closing her eyes tight. He noticed a shimmer peeking from the corner of each eye. Look at me, Isabella. He requested softly. What is wrong? he asked her when she opened tear-laden brown eyes to meet the concerned red ones hovering above. She released his hand to grab her notebook and scribbled out a hasty note. This wouldn't have happened if I hadn't overreacted this morning when Caius told me that I'm his mate. I ran off, stewing in my own little angst party, and fell the hell down the stairs. I was being stupid. Marcus reached for her and pulled her into an embrace. As her self-recriminating tears fell, he held her and stroked her back lightly. Everyone makes mistakes, young one, and after your experiences I'm not surprised you had an adverse reaction to that bit of news. Your natural hesitance, however, does not in any way affect the veracity of the information he imparted. You are his mate, Isabella, and he yours. She gifted him with a wet smile and scrawled the words. I know, I just had to let myself believe it. That's all for now. After analyzing my audience, I noticed that most of you prefer shorter videos, so I've decided to divide this into 2 parts. This was part 1, and the second half will be coming very soon. Until then, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so YouTube can personally notify you when the next part is out. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.